by Benning. Darnell Nurse left it in the corner, gets up center. Perry scores! Corey Perry!
Lilia able to shake away from Solani. It's given away to Solani. Around in front. Score! Teemu Solani with the steal.
Three in the fence, one. Score! On the board! Paul Kariya!
Oh, nothing today. Okay. All right. Left me hanging. Thanks. Waiting for you to do whatever it is that you wanted to do.
Blow his nose.
I couldn't get you. I just laughed.
Just blanked in the moment, eh? Love it. All right, well, we're back. Draft preview show finally. Just cutting it under the wire 4 days before the draft, but we're getting it out there. It's one of my favorite shows. I know this is one of your favorite shows, Jay, right? You've got your...
I have zero idea. Besides Shane Wright, is like all I know is like, all right, then like the next 9 guys are kind of good, and then after that, no one cares.
Yeah, it's
find your diamond in the rough
accurate.
and let's move on.
That's accurate of every draft every year. One or two guys. The rest, the next 6 or 7 are okay, and it's just a crapshoot after that.
That's why they do 2 through 7 on a separate day, so that hopefully someone will just click over randomly.
Yeah.
Find themselves in the middle of the 4th round.
Watching rounds 2 through 7 on TV is the most chaotic and unenjoyable experience ever. It's just round 2 is okay, 3 is not so bad, and then 4 through 7 just like fly by, and they talk about like 1 or 2 guys around. And they go to commercial break, and you come back, and 10 picks have been made. You have to try and like scramble back. Like it's just so much easier to just follow Twitter at that point for whoever's at the draft, and just figure out who gets drafted at that point.
Yeah, I would say like after the first 2 rounds, it's kind of like, all right, now everyone's got their little what they think is the diamond in the rough of who's going to help out the team. It's like. Yeah. It's not going to be important today. It's not going to be important next season. It might be important 3 seasons down from now. But at this point, there's no reason to really kind of go through that.
You can't
process.
even get like
like
Pastujov and Zellweger were considered steals at the draft. You're like, okay, like they could be, and then you didn't really get an idea of how right that take was until this season, where they both kind of popped off. Mm-hmm. So you get some early looks the next season after, but yeah, you don't get the full product 2, 3, 4 years down the road unless it's the first round pick and the guy jumps right in to the lineup right after that, right? But even McTavish looked like an okay pick at 3. It was a little bit of a reach. Now it looks great. Looks like he could be but one season makes all the difference in that sense. A great season from him, and now it looks like he could potentially be. Right now, just based off projections and the way guys have done, like he's probably at the top of that list in terms of, being the most NHL ready and the guy who could have the most impact. Now, obviously, Power is going to play next year, and a few of those other guys are going to play, so that will, that gap will shorten a little bit. But right now, I think he's given himself the best shot to be the best player out of the draft, or at least the best player the soonest out of that draft.
Yeah, I got to stop paying attention once they don't have highlights of the dude who just got picked. Like, if they're not showing him doing things, like, at that point, it's like, okay,
yeah,
there's obviously not worth my time if they're not even showing, oh, cool, look, he does these skates in practice. They don't even show that. If they don't do it, like, oh, he got it. Yeah, he's good in these ways, and they start just listing him down. I'm like, all right, I'll see you later.
Yeah. Well, yeah, round 1's good for that because you get to
They
look at them with
their
their family, and then you get they break it down for a good 2-3 minutes in between the next pick, and they take their time between picks. Like when the pick is in, they'll still wait a little bit and finish their talk. Round 2's a little bit like that, and then round 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 after that, it's just like rapid fire through the picks, and then they'll have their guys they kind of pick based on whatever, and they've got film for. But usually it's not your guy. I think the Ducks were lucky last year that the first 3 picks, and then maybe one of their later picks got some coverage on TV, which was nice, but it's because they ended up picking guys that were supposed to go a lot higher. But yeah, okay, well, we're into our 2022 draft preview. Like I said, 4 days from the draft. We had plans to be there before the pandemic. This was supposed to be last year when it was supposed to be in Montreal. Obviously we're not in Montreal. It's not working, but it will
Eddie's
be
the closest though.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not going to Quebec. Not a chance. not a chance. Even didn't want to really go to Quebec before when everything was fine. But it's not happening. And like I mean, it's great for them. It worked out in the sense that Montreal gets the first overall pick, and it's in Montreal. That doesn't help.
Didn't it only happen like one other time?
That the
Felt like
home
that
team
happened.
has had the first overall pick?
Yeah. And I also
Yeah, I
felt
think
like
it
it was
happened in
another
the-
Canadian team, too.
I think it was in the early 90s.
Yeah. It hasn't happened. I know like there's been a few where they've had like a top 3 pick, and it's worked out. But yeah, I mean, it doesn't help the skeptics. The moment Montreal won, even though I think they had the best odds anyway,
NHL,
they're like, oh God, they rigged it so they can have the
It's
first
rigged.
pick at home.
I always, always, but I'll from now on, I'm always going to tweet out just before they announce who the winner is. I'm going to say rigged because I want to be the first, because that's the way it's always going to go. It's rigged. Whoever won, it's rigged.
Yeah, that's
True.
Yeah. No, you guys
There's no version
before
of
we get to the draft, no Batman at the Cup because he had COVID, the Cup celebration, and he still got booed.
I didn't get the chance to see it because, shocker, I was playing hockey, so I missed it. But that really happened. They just booed.
Yeah, they had Bill Daly was presenting it, and he mentioned something about Batman. I don't know what it was.
And
Something
then
about
everyone
him.
started booing.
Yeah, it was
The
a
tradition lives
slow
on. That's
boo,
gotta be
slow
like the
quiet boo.
longest tradition right
Yeah.
now.
Easier to boo him when he's there in person, but they
Yeah.
just booed the mentioning of his name, and then
I know.
they quickly moved on. So
I love fans.
that's great. Okay,
Sometimes.
so today we're gonna talk about who the Ducks get at 10, a little bit about who they get at 22, some of the guys that should be gone before 10. Break down
There it is,
into,
Steven.
yeah,
We needed that at the beginning.
7 minutes too late.
Yeah.
And then we're gonna dive into a little bit of some of the trades that could happen. We talked about that on a couple shows before this about Gibson, who the Ducks could look at. Some news came out today that the Ducks are still in on Chychrun, which isn't really news. They've been in on Chychrun since he was available, and they're in the mix with like 10 other teams. So, but they're still in the mix. So we'll talk about that. What could happen? What guys could get moved out the door? What guys could come in? And then really whatever we want to talk about from there on out.
So,
Oh.
real quick, just out of curiosity, I think it could be an interesting way to start the conversation is what do you guys feel that Anaheim should be looking for in this draft? Like, what are like areas of concern for you or skill sets that you think are lacking?
Everything except goaltending. Quite honestly,
It's not
like
wrong, yeah.
I mean, yeah, we're gonna need defense. We're gonna need, it's real simple. Just get another McCarr. If you can find another McCarr, just
Sure,
pick
yeah.
him, and then gold. You're good. So I mean, but they need forwards. They need guys who can finish plays. They're gonna need center depth. They're gonna need wingers. They're gonna need defense. I mean, it's all over the place. They need a lot of things right now.
Yeah. I'm kind of in the same boat. Like you've got your core pieces. Like I'm not sold forever Zegras is going to be a center. So I'm not opposed to getting another center, a guy who could be like a second or third line center in hopes that if Zegras isn't the center, then McTavish becomes the number one center and you have another guy who could slot in. Or so I don't think it's the biggest need, but I'm not opposed to taking a center at 10 or at 22 to kind of add to that depth. Defenseman, I think, should be you use one of those first round picks on a defenseman. Because I think with Lindholm out the door, Manson might come back, but with him getting moved, the Ducks do have some good young defensemen, Zellweger, Lacombe, Thrun on the way, and obviously Drysdale on the team. But I think outside of Drysdale and the potential for Zellweger, there isn't anybody who screams top 4 defenseman right now that is like a lock to become that or is on their way to becoming that. I think Lacombe and Thrun and some of the other guys the Ducks have in the system could get there, but that's like the high-end ceiling of their projection is they become a top 4 defenseman. The more likely they become kind of a bottom pairing guy. So I think if you're looking at like the top end of the draft, depending who's available, I think that should be kind of the big ad somewhere with one of those first 3 picks is a defenseman with high upside. There could be some risk involved and fine with that, but somebody who on the top end of their projection looks like a guy who could be like a 2-3-4 would be I think a big need just to kind of bolster that prospect pool. Because it wasn't long ago where the Ducks were considered one of the best teams at producing and drafting defensemen, right? And then we either traded them all out the door or run them into the ground with guys like Larson and Mahura. So I wouldn't mind adding a few more of those guys in.
Yeah, I think that's kind of it for me. And is, like I was trying to just like think about like kind of just like questions going into the draft that I felt like should be kind of like a guiding light. And like the questions I came up with is who plays with Drysdale? Who plays with Zellweger? What happens if Zellweger busts? Where are the goals coming from? How many top six guys do we still need? And what if Terry regresses? These are like, to me, like those are the main questions that I think kind of need to be addressed going into this draft. And I think for me, I would really, really like to see Anaheim come out of this draft with a couple of big defensive prospects, like just physical specimens. And there's a lot of guys in this draft kind of sprinkled throughout the first handful of rounds that have different levels of upside, but there are plenty of very large boys that can become real menaces.
Man.
On the blue line and stuff. But no, I just, but the other one for me is just like goal scoring. Like I agree. Like there's just a lack of finishing talent in the top six, and I think McTavish looks like he could step in and solve some of that.
Yeah.
But you can't expect one guy to fix that problem entirely. And Terry and Zegras are both facilitators first. So for me, having guys who are going to step in and shoot, because like there's nothing in Perot yet to be confident in, right? There's nothing in Pastujov to be confident in.
There's nothing in the lineup or about to be in the lineup other than really McTavish that you can say, okay, this guy could score 25, 30 goals a season for the team.
Yeah.
Even with McTavish, that's the hope, and it looks like he could get there, but he's not there yet. So the more swings you have at guys that could do that, and like, yes, Terry just had an excellent season, but he's still not a shot first guy. That's not where, he doesn't project as a 30 goal scorer because of his shot, because he's a guy who shoots the puck a lot. He's just a really skilled player. He gets himself into good positions, and he can score goals in a lot of different ways. He still could be that player, but again, you don't know. So there really is no surefire thing. We'll get to trades, but if you bring in DeBrincat, that's a surefire guy. He's going to score 40 a season. He's got the skill set and the proof to do that. But yeah, I think you're right. Like the Ducks need some more guys who project to be goal scorers at the NHL level, at least 20 goals, and then defensemen to kind of flesh out that pool in case Zellweger doesn't pan out, in case some of the other guys don't work out, and then who's going to play with Drysdale long term, because right now it's just Drysdale and Fowler.
Yeah, I don't think they're going to do anything to address the issues they have currently. What they have currently, that's going to have to come through either free agency or trade.
Yeah.
Whatever they're getting, that's just for down the road at this point. With the 10th and the 22nd, it's just those guys don't usually jump in the next season. It usually takes a couple of seasons down the road. So, yeah, building that pipeline is great. I think they gotta kind of redo that or refocus on what Verbeek wants to do as far as the team he sees. And at this point, it's in such a rebuild. I don't know if you just go with the best available, whatever position, whatever it is. Obviously, if you have a lack at a certain position in the pipeline, then maybe you don't take the best forward, but you take that defenseman, and at least he's the best defenseman available, and there's something in your pipeline. And then ultimately, if there's a logjam at some point, you can, at that point from this draft to where we should be competitive, if there's a logjam at that position, you can trade that out for what you need.
Yeah,
and that's
what the Kings are doing right now. So
yeah.
I know. I think I'm like right in the middle of that. I think take the best player available as long as they fit the way you want this team to play in the future, right? No, like you could have a ton of defensemen or a ton of centers or a ton of wingers. If they all project to play the way you want to play, I don't really care how many guys you have at that position, because like you said, you can move guys out in trades to get another guy that you want. You can sign guys in free agency to fill holes later. Like we just talked about drafting shooters, and I don't think you necessarily have to reach to draft a shooter because you need a goal scorer, where if there's a better player at that position that you still think can fit the way you want to play, then I'm fine taking that better guy, even if it is a position of strength, let's say down the middle right now, where if you think Zegras and McTavish are going to be the 1-2, but if the best player available at 10 or the best player available on your list at 22 is a center, take him. And then figure it out down the road. Again, there's no guarantee that you can't move Zegras to the wing, that you can't move McTavish to the wing. There's no guarantee that either of them long-term yet are going to be centers at the NHL level. There's definitely instances where they could end up moving to the wing. So yeah, at that point, yeah, I take whoever's the best available as long as they fit the way you want to play.
It's kind of like waves. Like we have a need right now, that's wave one. But when you go into a draft, you're looking at, all right, 3 years, that's the next wave that comes through. Like, where are we going to be as a team when that wave hits, and are we going to kind of be there? So, as I said, like, drafts, very rarely are you getting something that's going to help you on this first wave. It's what happens next.
Yeah.
That's where we're at.
Especially at this point where the team is. Like, when you're a competitive team and you've got your core built and you're set for the next 5 to 10 years, and you know you need something in the next couple 3 years, like, for Tampa, for example, these guys are going to be here, and if you're debating between two guys
circumventing the cap, yes,
yeah. If you know these two guys are going to be here, and you need whatever, a middle six winger over a defenseman, even if the defenseman's slightly higher in your list, maybe you take the middle six winger because they might have a faster path to the NHL. They fit the need that you have there. For teams like that, I can understand. For a team like the Ducks right now, where they're just kind of kicking off the rebuild, you really just take whatever projects the best for you and to fit your roster the best in the future. And then if it doesn't work at that point or whatever, you move that guy out, you get a piece that does fit. Next year, we're going to be talking about the same thing in the draft, right? Like, the needs are going to be roughly the same. It's always best to kind of just take whoever is on your list at the top at that point and worry about positions later. I think for goaltending, it's a bit different. There's also not a lot of great goaltenders in this draft anyway. There's no Spencer Knight or anything like that this year. I think that's the only place where you could say... I just
missed out. I'm just barely not draft eligible. Otherwise...
D plus 15 year?
Yeah, man, just that first round.
Go for the Calder Trophy next year.
As a nice little 38-year-old. Tim Thomasing the shit out of it.
All right. Let's kick this off. Just mention a few of the guys I think that are going to be gone before 10. Like, there's no shot. There's always a chance a guy like a Zegras again falls to 9. You get him.
Shane Wright.
But
so okay,
yeah.
To that end, like, I actually was curious about that. Like, if Anaheim traded into the top 3 or traded for the top pick or whatever, like just as a hypothetical, right? Like,
yeah.
Who would you guys take in that group?
At number 1?
Mm-hmm.
Like, if you could pick from anybody, yeah, I'd still take Shane Wright. I think a lot of the fact that he missed a season and didn't put up what people thought were like exceptional status numbers. He had a great season. Like, I think it was like 90 plus points in 50 games, but it was below the pace that he had in that 15-year-old season, and then he missed his 16-year-old season. So people are like, oh, okay, well, like, because they had these expectations, he fell short of it. So now he's fallen out of that guaranteed number 1 slot because other guys have stepped up. Like, that's the thing with the draft every year is his expectations were so high compared to everybody else that it was so hard to hit it. And he kind of went slightly under that. But Slavkovsky jumped way up, Cooley way up. So now these guys are on the up, and it looks like Wright's on the down. So they're getting first overall pick votes. And I think they're really good, but like Shane Wright, for me, when we look at this draft 10 years from now, I think he's going to be the best player, and it's going to be no question. These guys are going to be great, but he's just on another level.
Would you rather have a Shane Wright with this core for the Ducks moving forward?
Yeah.
Like, he just he's 100%. NHL ready, essentially, so he's already kind of there and can build with this group versus everyone else. There's a chance maybe the first couple might actually do it, but
it's just insane.
I mean, he's as closest to a sure thing NHL starter in this draft.
He's like the guy every team asks for, right? Like, just a great, reliable, shutdown two-way defenseman who also has like 60, 70 point upside. Like, every team wants this guy, a lock at center at the NHL level. And for some reason, like, I get it, Slavkovsky's a big 6'4" winger, and he looks like a Rantanen type, and the Avalanche just won a cup, or so there's a need and a want for a guy like that. He's going to be great. And Cooley is a really creative, undersized 5'10" center who maybe has the top skill in this draft. But like, everybody always wants a player like Shane Wright that projects to be what he could be. And for some reason, he's fallen off. And a lot of that is just because of the expectations. Like, when you're an exceptional status player, you're supposed to be like McDavid. You're supposed to be putting up insane numbers, and he put up great numbers. But I don't think enough has been said about the fact that, again, he missed an entire year as an underage player. At 15, he put up better numbers than McDavid. He's not going to be better than McDavid, but then he didn't get to play in the 16-year-old season. He misses a year of development.
Name one person who's going to be better than McDavid.
Yeah, no one.
I'll wait.
Yeah.
I'll wait.
But, like, you know, there's something to be said about missing a whole year of development and then having to come back this year and try and make up for that, and you still put up great numbers, but it's not at the same level as what they expected. I think if he had played a full season last year and then played this year, I think he would have had better numbers. I think he would have been at that point where we're talking about 110, 120 points in the OHL season, because he has that extra year and under his belt and a little bit more experience and how to kind of break down defenders in the league. And I think it would have been that year, and there would have been no question that he's number 1 overall pick. I think whoever Montreal takes of those 3 that we talked about, they're going to walk away with a good player. I think when we look back at it, in my opinion, if you don't take Shane Wright first overall, you're going to be like, damn, we missed out on it.
Yeah. You're going to have to explain that later.
You're going to be slightly disappointed that, you know, you could have had this guy. You'll still be happy with who you had, but I just think, he's going to be something else. He just looks like he's going to be a great player. The one type of player that every team kind of wants to have.
Yeah, I've been thinking about it just a little bit, like, just because, you know, like you said, like, he came into this, like, draft cycle as the projected number 1, and by most models, he still is. And there's definitely something to be said that everybody shoots at the front runner, right? So he's been out there, and it's been picking him apart to see what it is about him that maybe pulls him back. And then on the other time, it's what are these guys bringing that can push him forward? And I think for Anaheim, it's really interesting to me, because I think you have to take Shane Wright if you're Anaheim, because it answers a question for 10 years, which is, who's our second line center? And I know he, like, projects to possibly be, you know, a lower end first line center, but to me, he is probably at worst a second line center.
Yeah, it all comes down to the points, right? That separates that difference, I think.
Mm-hmm. And so, you know, with McTavish and with Zegras and you know, looking at those two, it makes a lot of sense, like, for Anaheim to go after, like, Yuri Slafkovsky, right? And to pick up a big bruising winger, maybe to play up with Zegras. So now you've got some meat on his line, and you're able to, you know, let McTavish stay separate. And so now you've got big bodies and goal scoring and, you know, that kind of play on 2 different lines. And, you know, Cooley seems like someone that is so incredibly tantalizing. I think it would be very hard for me, if I wasn't Anaheim, to not take Cooley first overall. I think his upside is the highest. I think based on everything I'm hearing and the little bit I've seen, like, his upside is insane. And, like, for Arizona, he seems like a perfect guy, because they need something. They need something to show. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And the idea that he could be a Braden Point-esque, you know, dynamic offensive forward.
What are we talking about? Because the Ducks aren't going to get either of these people.
There's a few teams. There's a few teams that are willing to, like, number 1, Montreal. They're not moving it, but, you know, New Jersey's listing on number 2. Flyers are listening on 5. Ottawa's looking at trading 7. So there's, like, a chance to jump up to, you know, 2, 5, or 7 potentially, or something like that. So we're looking at these guys as guys they can't get, but there's there's a chance that if you move up, you know, we got to talk about them, because you could get these guys and where they
potentially
fit, right?
If Gibby goes and we get the number 2. Okay, all right. I was sitting here going like, we're not getting 1 or 2. Like, it didn't occur to me, like, oh yeah, we could probably trade up. I don't think it's gonna happen.
No, neither do I.
No, I don't think so either. But I just think this top 5 is so fascinating, because to me it seems pretty clearly that the consensus 5 is Cooley, Wright, Slafkovsky, Juracek, Nemec. One of those guys answers one problem for every, like, the degree to which bringing one of those guys in is almost easy as pie is so crazy to me, that they are so projectable as to what role they can play on a team, right? That I just think it makes the process of, like, thinking about it and thinking about what teams fit where and stuff like that. But it does feel like, you know, for most teams, it's like just don't overthink it. Just take Shane Wright and run.
Yeah.
And so
I think
I can't imagine they don't.
yeah, no, neither can I. I think when you look at their team too, like there's a desperate need for a guy who could be a 1 or 2 center. Nick Suzuki will be a great number 2, and I think Shane Wright could be a good number 1 for Montreal. Like I do think he can be a number 1 center. I don't think he's going to be a guy who like gets to 90, 100 points, but I don't think you need that to be a number 1 center. I think him and Suzuki as like a future 1-2 in Montreal is a really, really good start for them to get back to being a competitive team that they hope to be. And they've got a lot of good young wingers like Caulfield as well. So I think that's the pick that makes sense for them. And then you look at 2, I think Slafkovsky's a slam dunk for New Jersey. They don't need Cooley. They might take a defenseman, but I think when you think Slafkovsky to go with Hughes and Hischer, that just makes sense. Then, like you said, Arizona at 3, it's got to be Cooley. You need a kind of a game-breaking center.
Probably on the way out.
Yeah, exactly. And you need. What do you need if you want to revive that franchise? A really exciting player who has the potential to be the best player from this draft and whose skill level is probably among the best. That would.
And he's American.
Yeah, and he's American, so that helps as well.
I was gonna say they're gonna go Shane Wright because he's a good old Canadian boy.
Yeah, it looks like it just projects well for each team to kind of get what they need. Obviously, somebody will throw a wrench in things and mess it up, but for Seattle,
looking at you, Arizona.
Yeah. And unless or if Montreal doesn't take, if they take Slafkovsky number 1. If you're New Jersey at that point, you got 2 centers you're looking at. Do you take a defenseman and then does Wright start falling from there? And then Seattle at 4, if both those defensemen fall into their lap, they'd pick whoever they like better, Nemec and Juracek. But if Wright's there, do you go Wright and Beniers as your 2 centers? So
right.
It really is like in Montreal's hands because Montreal takes Wright. It seems to fall into place for every team to kind of go like Slafkovsky, Cooley, Nemec, and then the Flyers can really do whatever they want at 5, but they probably take the defenseman who doesn't get taken at 4. And then, because I think it is that kind of consensus top 5, and then at 6 it gets kind of weird where you can take anybody because there's that tier of 5, and then 7 to 11, and then everybody else from there. But yeah, Flyers could move that pick; they could take anybody, and then I'm trying to remember who's at Detroit's at 6, right?
No, 6 is Columbus.
6 is Columbus. Yeah, again, Columbus could do anything. Ottawa could do whatever they want. They could move that pick and then so on from there. So Detroit's at 8, Buffalo's at 9, and the Ducks at 10. Yeah, and so really outside that top 5 is where you get into anybody could be available at 10 for the Ducks, depending on who teams like. I put Matt Savoy in that likely gone by 10 because he just feels like a pick if it goes in that order that Columbus would love at 6 to really skilled creative center. To go with a guy like Laine, that if he ends up sticking around, and some of the other prospects have Kent Johnson, like he felt like a pick that
wasn't Dubois a center?
Yeah, Pierre-Luc Dubois. Mm-hmm. Yeah, he was.
Yeah. So they lost him. So yeah, they probably want to try and see if we can refill that position if they could.
Yeah, well, yeah, they might. Yeah, because Jack Roslovic is looking great
solid.
For them. Yeah,
and it sounds like Dubois on the way out of Winnipeg anyways.
Yeah,
I think both of those guys, like they both didn't like where they were, and they both got traded to other teams they didn't want to be at. So I think they're both like Laine's out, Dubois out. They're each looking to hit free agency and go wherever they.
I think surprisingly, like out of both of them, I thought Dubois would stay in Winnipeg and Laine would go. Now I think Laine is potentially more likely to stay. I think he can do it. Like he's getting the freedom without Torts there now, and from the GM to kind of do whatever he wants, and they're going to build a team to kind of support him to be that 40 or 50 goal scorer. And I think Johnson, a line potentially of Kent Johnson, Savoy, and Laine,
Boquist.
Boquist on the blue line. Like the way they want to play, I think it fits into.
I think Laine's out. Laine's a big dude. Like he likes himself some Laine. So I think in his opinion, he's like, I'm the best. Like even when they were kind of doing like, between him and Austin Matthews, who do you take? He goes, I'm a better player.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
yeah,
I love it.
But so like for him, it was like, he's not going to want to play in Columbus. He's going to play either a big stage or get a big contract or do something like that. I don't think he's ever hit his potential because I don't know if he's just like, wants to wherever he wants to go, that's where he wants to play and then shine. So I think whoever grabs him is great. They're gonna have to pay a crap load of money to get him, but I don't think he stays in Columbus, to be honest.
I was
Like
Bjorkstrand I was
stuff.
thinking of.
Oh, right. Yeah, I completely forgot
Not
about him, too,
Boquist,
yeah.
my bad.
Yeah, even if Line does go, they'll get something for him because they'll trade his
Oh, yeah.
rights or whatever. I think bringing in, they're looking to build a skilled, quick, fast puck moving team. I think a guy like either Kemmel or Savoy fits there, and then anywhere from 6 to 10 could be any of these guys that are here. We have a list
You could go
of
6 to 13.
yeah, we have a list
could,
of a
like-
bunch of guys that the Ducks could be interested in. Kemmel, Cutter Gauthier, Frank Nazar, Jonathan Lekiermaki, Kevin Krasinski, Pavel Mintuyakov, Denton Matejchuk, Marco Kasper, Brad Lambert, and Connor Geeky as the options that could go at 10. A lot of the mock drafts have had the Ducks taking any number of those guys. Kasper, I've seen, Krasinski, Geeky, Gauthier.
Yeah,
I think
Cam
I've seen go
Robinson's
10.
mock had us taking Geeky.
Yeah, so there's a lot of different
thought it was
options, and
interesting.
they're all like a bunch of different options. There's some goal scoring wingers like Kemmel and Gauthier. There's some quick, speedy, do it all forwards like Nazar. A bunch of defensemen and Krasinski, Matejchuk, Mintuyakov in there. So there's a lot of, and the big center Connor Geeky, 6'4" center. There's a lot of different options for the Ducks. We already talked about it briefly, but to go more in depth of what kind of player you would rather take at 10. Who, out of all those guys, we look at them, what kind of skill set, what kind of player are you looking for if you could pick any of the line? Assuming that all the forwards are going to hit and be top 6 forwards, the defensemen are going to be top 4 defensemen, what kind of profile are you looking for most at 10?
I think so. It's interesting because I know you had said that you had kind of divided them between picks 10 and picks 20, and I kind of just built 2 columns of forward, like one column of defensemen and one column of forwards.
Yeah.
And like at 10, I think based on upside, I think Korchinski makes a lot of sense as far as a left-handed puck-moving defenseman. He seems to have a ton of just offensive skill and ability to be kind of a one-man breakout. But I think I would be very hard-pressed to pass on a Kasper or a Nazar in that role. Even a Gauthier, I think he'll be gone by then. But I think Nazar for me and Kasper and their kind of ability to be do-it-all guys. Kasper, according to EP, is one of the best defensive forwards in this draft. To have that and be able to add him into your lineup with Terry, McTavish, and Zegras, I think could really give you a very dynamic lineup.
I would go, or at least what I think the Ducks will probably do, or at least what Verbeek has said he wants a competitor. He wants somebody who's going to be in that. I mean, like McTavish is perfect. I feel like that is hitting on all of that. So I think that's probably, his main thing is not necessarily size, not necessarily the bigger guys, although he also said we want to do that. But and I think this is a great way to go, is just that compete level. It sounds so cliche, but someone who's going to be in and just wants to win. Hates losing as more than they like winning type of deal. So I feel like if they can find that person, and whether or not they're skating, that's like the easiest. I won't say the easiest, but that's like something that can be worked on.
Yeah.
If you don't have the effort to want to go into it, or you rely too much on, I'm really good at a slap shot or a wrist shot or a one-timer, or whatever that is, and you just hone in on that, and that's what you are hanging your hat on, then I don't think that's the right fit for what Verbeek wants. And that's, so if your skating's bad, but you can work on that. Your size is bad, you can work on getting upper body strength. You can do a lot of those things. But if your compete level's not there, and you're not vicious on a forecheck, or you're not, engaged in that way, then I think Verbeek's probably going to pass you over. So I think they're probably looking for somebody who's just going to, work their ass off, and the little minor details can get worked out through coaching.
Yeah. No. Okay. That gives me a good kind of direction where to go with this first pick. Steven, you mentioned
You're
him.
welcome.
And then Jason's description kind of marks this player to a T. And he's I can't remember what mock draft they had him going to the Ducks in at number 10, but Marco Kasper was in one of those mock drafts. He's a guy that can kind of go anywhere from like even 6 to 15. Like he's one of those players. He does everything average to above average. Nothing really exceptional other than the way, like the physical style of game that he plays and the compete level, the commitment level that he has. He plays every game like it's Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Final. Like he just. That's
Love
the way
those guys. Love those guys.
It's the way he plays. So there will be a team that thinks that they can work on the offensive side of things. They can get his skating a little bit better. He's not a bad skater. It's an average to above average skating stride. But there'll be a team that think, okay, we can work with this kid and he can get to that level where he's a really good second line center or a 1B, to that same projection level as Shane Wright. So he's a guy who could go really early. Like I think a lot of people put him in Detroit because Irishman will look at this guy as a guy that they could work on and have a nice little combo of him and Larkin. But if he is available at number 10 for Anaheim, he is a guy I really like. Like I tend to lean a bit more to the real high upside guys, that have some risk attached to it, but it's workable. Like you said, Jason, guys who maybe the skating isn't there or something that you could work on that's a little bit easier to work on. The offense and everything is there, but a bit of an easier project to work on and things you can put together. But for Kasper, like the guy just plays a style of game that you love. He hits everything that moves, but he does it in a way that doesn't take him out of the play. He's kind of worded and listed as like a violent, competitive hockey player, but he doesn't take things over the line. He take somebody one of the scouting reports. Yeah, exactly, right? Like he kinda,
he's exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, he plays like that.
Verbeek is like the two things that Pat Verbeek has said that he wants in the draft more than anything, like you said, is compete and intelligence, right? He wants guys who are smart on the ice and know how to compete. And Marco Kasper, no, you can't. Marco Kasper is exactly that guy. And I think to me, if you're saying like what's Marco Kasper's upside, it's Ryan Kessler, Ryan O'Reilly kind of, two-way physical force that you really can just kind of throw out and not worry about. Downside, I guess, you're looking at like, I don't know.
So what's the offense going to be?
Stahl.
Yeah, exactly. No, I think that's the perfect one. Is Stahl, where the offense. I mean, Stahl now in a sense, right?
Yeah.
Is that
or Stahl when he was first on Pittsburgh?
Yeah.
And he was their third line guy.
Yeah. Yeah, like that's the difference between like Kasper. I think the consensus from a lot of people, he's going to play in the NHL. He's going to be a middle six winger or center in the NHL. It just the offense is going to determine how high he goes, and there's really no, crystal ball to look into the future and say, okay, like he's going to be a 40, 50, 60, 70 point guy. Like you just don't know. It just depends on how that skill set translates. But everything else says like there's a scouting report that said nearly every one of our staff's Kasper viewings start with the Austrian winger taking a run at somebody on his first shift. Like he's just a guy, the moment the puck drops, he's ready to go. And he's out there to make life miserable to play against for the opposition. But at the same time, they put in here that his physicality isn't mindless. It's kind of integral to the way he plays. He just thrives when he turns hockey into pinball. He just loves to go out there, bang bodies, make it difficult for guys, shut them down.
All right, I'm sold.
Yeah, he's the type of player you love to have, right? We've talked about Kessler and Perry and those types of guys where that side of their game was to go out there and they got as much joy as putting a puck in the back of the net as making life as difficult as possible for
taking
the guy they're lining
water
up against.
Bottle, put it out, and then flip it off.
Well, that's like what Bobby Ryan was talking about when he was live tweeting the game, right? He was like, yeah, my best friend. He was like, this is one of those games that's made for Corey Perry. This is the kind of game where Corey Perry's going to grab these guys and drag them into the fight. And, that's when he starts to do all that Corey Perry blue paint gives me vertigo shit.
Dropping a knee on an ankle here and there.
just being an insane person. I think there's an argument to be made that Kasper is potentially the safest lottery pick on the board, just because I think his floor is. I guess Wright is probably the best, but Kasper is probably second.
Yeah, outside of that top five.
So high.
Yeah.
I think he could be like I think you could make an argument that Kasper is a safer pick than Juracek after that injury, right? After his skating hasn't been great, and obviously the injury makes a big difference as he continues to rehab and all that stuff. Like that's something you can work on, but that is something that multiple people have said when they've talked about Juracek. We have to watch out. He was injured. His skating didn't look great. We think it's just recovery, but the way that they were talking about him on the PDO cast, like he was giving me like Matthew Tkachuk vibes, as far as just being an absolute shitster. But like, I honestly wonder if he's not in Ottawa. Like, I feel like he's going to go at 7 to Ottawa because he seems like the perfect guy to have with Brady Tkachuk.
Yeah, I mean, you look at any team there, like that's the thing with him and why he could go so high and why, like, out of anybody we're going to talk about today is a potential, like, wild card to sneak into the top 5 because he fits on every team. Like, every team wants to have a guy like this. Like, scouts and coaches, they all kind of, like, rave about his work ethic, the coachability, the competitive nature that he has, the generally great demeanor that he has. There's really no bad things they ever say about him. Like, the cons I found are that his skill and sense are never going to rate his elite tools, but they've grown to a point where, like, they're average, which is not really a con. Like, it's just he's not elite in those areas, but he's still average NHL level in skill and puck skills and playmaking. Talk about his advanced playmaking opportunities kind of elude him, but he still has the basis of, a good first pass, can find the open man, can make space for himself. He just doesn't have, like, the elite end playmaking, which is fine. Like, not many guys have that, but he's got everything average or above average, and the guy will work at it. Like, that's the thing I think a lot of scouts and coaches love is that he will give you 110% every night, and he's a great physical shutdown player, and he can contribute offensively every now and then. He's got this, it's not a detriment to him. He's not a third or fourth line center that does all that because he can't contribute offensively. Like, again, like you said, a Jordan Staal or, a Ryan O'Reilly at the high end. Like, every team wants to have a guy like that who you can throw out and there's no worry when he's out there. He's going to make something happen, whether it's offensively or defensively. He's not going to be a detriment to you. And there's a way, if he goes in the right situation, you can mold him potentially into that, really high-end second-line center that everybody hopes that he could be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Interesting to think about if the Ducks would, like I obviously don't know what happens at the draft where everyone's got their little table and they talk to all the other GMs. I'm wondering if, like, those GMs, like, talk to each other, like, hey, who are you planning on taking? Next. And then if it's like that guy, do the GMs go like, I really want that guy. Here's a trade proposal, and let's try and make that work. Because I wonder if, like, if they do that on that premise, would the Ducks try and do something to kind of get that guy? Because I feel like he would fit better, fit the best, I guess, for what the Ducks are looking for. And if, it's a little bit of a trade thing, would they try and pull the trigger to make that happen? Obviously, it depends on the team.
Yeah.
Depends on who's going to do that sort of deal. But
yeah, I think there's a good chance. Like, there's a real chance to move up to 5 or 7 and use the 10 to get there. I think 7 makes a bit more sense because I think the Flyers are looking at literally just trading the 5 for a high-end asset. I don't know if that trade works for the Ducks. I think the Sens are open to moving 7 to get 10 and something else, like 10 and 53 or something like that. If the guy they think they can get, at 7 is also going to be there at 10. And if the Ducks want to jump up and get Casper or somebody at 7, I think that's the most likely move that they could make, where, again, you use that draft capital have, whether it's a second this year, one of your 3 or 4 seconds you have next year, package that with the 10, maybe another pick, a third or a fourth, and move up to 7 and get the guy you want. I think that's the most likely move for the Ducks to move up on draft day. And it really, again, depends on the sense, on who they want at 7. And can they get him at 10? Do they think they can get him at 10? Who's Detroit and Buffalo going to take at 8 and 9? I can see that. And I think it could be for a guy like Marco Casper. What?
Holy shit.
What?
Ryan McDonough got traded to Nashville.
Oh.
Moving cap.
For Mishmash and Phil Myers?
Yeah.
Not Breaking news. All right, we all have to put the camera a little bit higher so we're all like this, and you can only see our foreheads.
Where's Kevin Weeks?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I was like, breaking news.
Kevin Weeks and Pat
Here's my
Verbeek
forehead.
not knowing how to properly use a camera for a video.
So
that's what Pat Verbeek's doing. He's taking the Kevin Weeks school of addressing the media.
I think it just made me think about it right now. My favorite, 6D chess fantasy trade is trading up to 2 and then back for 6 and 12.
I love it. With Columbus?
Like trading Gibby, Zellweger for 2, right?
Yeah.
and then trading back with Columbus to 6 and 12 so they can take like Slafkovsky or Cooley. And then you can pick up like Casper and Korchinski, basically. Like,
So you have 6,
again,
12, and 22 at that point, yeah.
Yeah.
It's not bad.
No,
It's wild.
take 10 too.
It's
100%.
absolutely wild.
No,
I don't
use
think we've ever
22.
seen something like that happen on draft day. But
Yeah. That's,
be a
No,
way to
it's
make a
insane. It would
statement for
never happen.
Paverbeek. Oh, you never say never. But
well, once again, if you're playing, NHL 22, then
yeah.
Right, exactly.
you
No,
can do
this is
whatever you
just-
want.
But yeah, I do think there's a potential.
Approval
Again,
trades.
we're talking trades. I think they're with the draft capital and what Verbeek has said. Like the Ducks have the assets to move, from 10 to 7 or 10 to 2 or 10 to 5 or keep 10 and move other assets to get another pick in the top 15. Like they do have the ability to make that happen, and it's, again, if the right opportunity presents itself for them, I think Pat Verbeek is more than willing, and he said he's more than willing to do it. Okay, we got other players we got to get to. We'll kind of just briefly profile them and talk about their fit with the Ducks, if you think it'd be a good pick at 10. We'll go down the list. We've got Joakim Kemmel, the Finnish kind of, I don't want to say Patrick Laine light type player because he's not big. He's like 5'9", He's listed as 5'9", but also 5'11", so I don't know if it's 5'11" on skates, but he's a bit bigger than 5'9". But he's got the best one-timer in the draft, the third best kind of overall shot in the draft according to Elite Prospects. He has a very high-end skill level, and at one point, he had a really great start to the season. He was being considered to challenge for number 1, and then it kind of regressed a bit where the second half of the season wasn't as great, so he kind of lands in the middle of that, where he's now found himself in 5 to 10 range, potentially falling outside the top 10. So he's just a really good, creative, hard forechecking player, a little bit undersized. The only problem with him is that he's got this high-end skill, but he plays with the confidence of somebody like Connor McDavid, but he doesn't have the individual skill to go through 4 players. So there's a lot of low percentage shots where he'll try and kind of deke through 4 players when the safe pass is right there, and then he lacks a little bit of an extra gear in his skating. But other than that, he's a really high quality winger who, again, one-time option. We've talked about that for the Ducks for a while, and bringing in a right-handed one-timer for the power play, he kind of profiles as that. But yeah, there's just a little bit of cons there in terms of the skating, but you can work on that and the kind of decision making, I guess you could call it at this point. But again, they are workable skill sets, things you can kind of coach out of a player.
Yeah, and once again, I'm not a big fan of trying to draft what your needs are today or next season. It's where are we going to be on that next wave or that third wave coming in? Where do we project we're going to need help? So you can easily get someone via free agency or trade to fill in that right shot, one timer on the power play. You can't really draft that guy because we need that now. So once again, it's fine. I mean, he's got the opportunity to play and the opportunity to refine some of the other parts of his game to kind of help out. So it's there.
Yeah, and I think we've used this phrase multiple times already, and whatever in, but it's like that confidence, that tenacity. You can't really teach that overconfidence like that, right? What you can do is, it's a lot easier to get someone to rein it in or harness that in a way that is, more effective and productive than it is to try to get somebody to, kind of take that leap when that's not in them, I think Brad Lambert, who we'll probably get to at some point, is an example of that, right? A player who just hits so many boxes, and then you just watch him play over a period of time, and apparently he's just like floating in and out of plays. He's disinterested.
It's infuriating to watch with a guy with that much skill just kind of throw it away with some bad decisions.
So, I just, I think, to Jay's point, as far as like drafting for needs today versus tomorrow, I think if you take someone like Kemmel, I don't think they're coming into the lineup soon. I think that's a player who's probably 2-3 years away just based on like size.
Yeah.
So it wouldn't surprise me if that was a guy that they felt maybe they could either stash overseas for a year or something. Because he's playing over there, right?
Yeah, he's playing in Finland. I'm trying to remember the last Euro we drafted in the top 10. Would it have been Lindholm? Would have been the last one?
Yes.
I think so. It's been the NCAA, NTDP, CHL circuit for a while. Speaking of NTDP, Cutter Gauthier, friend of the show, Brett, his favorite player for the Ducks to take at 10. I've seen a few mock drafts where he's gone. And again, like Casper, he kind of projects to what the Ducks are, or at least what Pat Verbika said the Ducks are looking for in players, high compete level. He's 6'3", 201 pounds, can play every position. Whether he's a center or a winger, again, same in the sense of McTavish, not quite there if you could say for sure he's going to be a center, but at the very least he's going to be a really good middle six power forward with the potential, depending on the line mates, to be a top line goal scoring power forward in the NHL. I think he projects as one of the best bets to be a modern day power forward out of this draft. His shot is probably top 5 in the draft, along with Kemmel and a few of the other guys that we'll get to. Decent hands, again, net front presence, one of the best in the draft, up there with Marco Kasper as being a guy who's just going to be tough to deal with in front of the net. We've already got McTavish to do that as well, so that will be tough to go against all those guys potentially playing in front of the net. The only thing, again, with a lot of these guys with size and that to do a lot of things well, the skating is not bad, it's average, but it's not quite at the top, which is fine. Again, he's 6'3", not likely going to be the best skater in the draft at 6'3", 201 pounds. Potentially in the NHL at like 6'4", 220, right? Like you're rarely going to be one of the best skaters at that size as long as you can skate averagely and use your skating in a way that's efficient. You'll be fine. And then the kind of the hockey sense in the playmaking to make those extra plays, he doesn't necessarily have that, but all the intangibles, all the kind of base level skills are there. Again, like Casper, he's one of those guys, does everything pretty well. Nothing really bad, and a few things are above average, like the shot and the physicality. He kind of has near the top end of the draft with that.
Yeah, no, I think, apparently this year, like you're talking about him being a power forward, I guess this year him and the USNTDP coach were talking, and they were like, what we want you to focus on is being a power forward. And I guess there were 3 things. It's, am I playing inside the lines, or am I playing inside the dots? Am I moving my feet? And am I getting off shots or something like that? But, and they were like, and we just saw this over this year. Like he committed to growing in that way, and it paid off as the year went on. I think there are still some questions, like you said, about whether he is a center. I know I've heard that he wants to be a center, but there still seem to be some questions about whether he can do it. He's one of those guys that, like, whether he is or isn't, like, I don't know that it makes much of a difference on the impact he'll be able to have at the NHL level, assuming he pops. So to me, he's a great one. I think the upside is higher a little bit because I think like his offensive skill set is a little bit more advanced than Marco Kasper's. But I think overall those 2 guys are guys that you could very easily see being great value picks if they were to make it to 10.
What?
Like, I think.
Sorry. Go
No, go.
No, I was just curious what you guys think, like why somebody wants to be a center, and then why people go like, "You're not a center, dude. Don't be a center."
I think it's a hockey sense, the ability to kind of dictate play. If you can't do that, being a first and second line center at the NHL level is going to be difficult. We don't see too many first and second line centers on good teams that can't kind of drive the offense or dictate play themselves. And I think that's the limit for him right now, is he's got the size to do it. He's 6'3", 201 right now. He could play center in the NHL right now with that size. The only downside, again, is that hockey sense and that playmaking ability, and even the skating a little bit is not quite at that level that you expect from a player that's going to be a top 6 center in the NHL. I think that's the tough part, because you can take that away, right? You don't need the playmaking ability necessarily as a winger in the top 6 to get that done. You don't really need the skating to be a top 6 winger necessarily. So that's where, if those other things don't develop, just shift him to the wing and he'll get it done there. But if he can really work on the few aspects he needs to, then there is a chance he can play center. I think that's where that kind of distinction comes from.
So, like, if you're high hockey IQ, you're more likely to be kind of a center, obviously, if you have the skill set of face-offs and that sort of deal. But also, you have to be a little bit more defensive, but you also have to be patient. You have to have that hockey sense of, all right, I've got my wingers, and I've got to be able to dish it, and I got to wait for the right moment, but I also got to be responsible defensively. And so there's, I guess, a lot of hats to wear.
Yeah, the next
not
guy,
everyone's built for it.
Yeah, the next guy we're going to talk about is Frank Nazar, and he has the hockey sense and the skill and the skating and the defensive acumen to do it. but he's 5'10", right? He's 5'10", 181. So he has the things that Gauthier doesn't have in the hockey sense and the playmaking ability and the dynamic skating that you're like, okay, that's great. But then he's 5'10", 181, so he's not 6'3", 201. You take Gauthier's size and you put the skill set of Nazar in there, you've got a first overall pick, right? Like, you've got a guy who can do it all. Yeah, exactly. But so that's the thing. I think with the bigger guys, there always seems to be a lack of hockey sense or playmaking ability. Usually that prevents them becoming a center, and you move him, becomes a big bruising power forward winger, kind of like a Rick Nash type guy. And for Nazar, it's again that lack of size to handle the physicality of being a top six center. There's not many guys in the NHL as top six centers that are 5'10". 181 pounds. So I think that's what kind of limits him. I know, Steven, he's one of your favorites, Nazar, coming into the draft.
Yeah, I love everything about him. To me, the thing with him is I think I guess the best version of the worst case scenario, I don't know how to say it, but like, to me, if he doesn't work at center, he seems like a lock to be the second right wing in the top six with Terry. Because to me, if you can have him and Terry on separate lines, I think you immediately improve the quality, the dynamism, and just the general level of play.
Did you say dynamism?
Dynamism, yeah, like dynamic.
That's a word?
I think so.
Okay.
Pretty sure
Dynamism. Just I was thinking like diamonds.
Yeah, I think
sorry.
it's dynamic.
But yeah, like I just think like if him and Terry are your top two right wings, I think you're in a really, really good spot. And I think it, potentially takes a ton of pressure off of guys like Pastiev and Tracy and Perreault, who right now you're really hoping one of those guys hits and pops into that top six. And if you can get a guy like Nazar and Perreault can be a third liner, that's huge. Or, you can use him in trades. You can move Tracy out, Comtois out, different things like that. I love Frank Nazar. I really just think that his fearlessness makes up for his lack of size, and I think his skating and his smarts will allow him to be successful at the NHL level. I really, really like Nazar. He is definitely someone that just the more I kind of learned about them, the more I became incredibly enticed by it. And it's interesting that you picked Cutter Gauthier, because the guy I was thinking of in reverse is Connor Geeky, right? Who's not a strong skater, but he's a phenomenal playmaker. He's responsible in his own end. Like, he's a guy that you're like, oh shit, yeah. But he's got the skating issues. And I think somebody said the comp for him on the low end is like Kirby Dack, and that makes you nervous because Kirby Dack hasn't really popped yet and stuff like that. But I know you had mentioned the other day that you have kind of a locks for your 10. Who is your 10 guy that you would love to take?
Yeah, I really like taking one of the high-end defensemen at 10. And Kevin Krasinski right now is my guy at 10. I want to briefly touch on Nazar, and then we'll dive into Krasinski. But I think with Nazar, from what he ranks anywhere from, I think Elite Prospects has him at 5. Like they think he has the highest ceiling of any player in the draft if he hits. The only downside with him is he's 5'10", 181 pounds. If he was a couple inches taller, he'd be in that discussion as being a top 10 pick. I think center is going to be very tough. I don't remember the last guy who's a 5'10" center in this league. Braden Point might be close. I think he's 5'10", 5'11", and that's one of the comparables he has is a guy like Braden Point. But everything checks out with this guy. Like, he's physical for a guy who's 5'10". His passing, his hockey sense, his skating is top 3 in all categories in the entire draft. His shooting is top 10. His puck handling, top 5, top 10. Like, he is a guy that probably won't be here. I think of all the guys I listed as options at 10 for the Ducks, he probably won't be there. There's going to be somebody that likes him enough and thinks they could work with him that the size won't be an issue, because that's the only issue with him. Like, there are some dynamic smaller wingers that defense ends up being an issue. No, this guy competes and he works hard, and he does everything right defensively. He fits the mold of what the NTDP usually churns out of really good, reliable 200 feet players. But then he's got that extra level of skill that just puts him in the conversation as one of the top 3 skilled players in this draft. And, again, it's the playmaking. He's got the shooting. He's deceptive. He skates circles around pretty much everybody but Brad Lambert in this draft. he projects as a really, really good player. But again, the size is what's going to take him out of it. Look at the size of all the top 5 guys we talked about already. And Wright's above 6 foot. Slavkovsky's 6'4". Jiricek and Nemec. Nemec's a bit smaller for a defenseman. I think he's 5'11", 6 foot.
He's about 6 foot. Jiricek's 6'2", and Cooley's 5'10". But Cooley's offensive dynamics and
and
his
the
creativity
legitimate projectability of him playing center, I think, takes him above Nazar. But I think if you could look at outside of those guys, Nazar might be a good shot to go in the top 6. But yeah, I think he'd be really, really good. Like I like the shot of him playing. He's very similar, maybe just a bit better offensively to Troy Terry, in the sense that Terry does everything well. Really good defensive forward, transition, one of the best transition players in the league last year. Creates goal-scoring opportunities with not like an excellent release, not a hard shot like McTavish has, but just deceptiveness. Likes to attack the triangles on players, likes to go at players and make them look ridiculous. So I think he's similar in that point. If you can get 2 players like that and play them on the right side and have one playing with Zegras and one playing with McTavish, that bodes well for the Ducks in the future. Jay, I know, again, just the type of player there that you could get, a guy who kind of does everything. Does the size bother you if you got a guy who could do that?
Well, first I want to touch on this. Dynamicism. I can't even get through that. It's an actual word.
Yeah,
Good
dynamism.
Job. I learned something. This is educational. I learned a new word today. So thank you for that, Steven. Sorry I train wrecked you because it just threw me off. And I still can't pronounce the word. No, it used to probably bother me, the old NHL, where size was really important to how you had to play in this NHL. Now it's smarts, it's quickness, and that really isn't defined by a bigger player. So if you can do the position well, and obviously if you're smaller, you might have a little bit of a disadvantage against bigger opponents. But if you can outsmart them, or you're quicker, or you're more dynamic, you're able to go ahead and overcome some of those. So it just depends if he's able to do it. So it's a bit of a risk to maybe take that if you're not sure he can do that. But once again, time and again, it seems like, you don't need 6'4". You don't need 6'1". You get guys that are under 6 feet and they're prolific in some cases. So if the skill set is there, then I don't really mind if you're not a big bruiser. Ducks are going to have some of those guys, but you got your Max Jones. You can add other pieces there if you need that physical side of things. But, if that skill set's there, then you take it, whatever package size it comes in.
No, yeah, for sure. I agree. I think out of all the guys we're going to talk about at number 10, I think he's the least likely to be there. Probably should have had him instead of Matt Savoy at that spot as a guy that's likely going to be gone, but he would be added to that list. I think of a guy that there's almost no chance, and it's almost like a Zegras-like fall if he's there at 10, where you kind of have to take him because he just is the player with the highest upside at that point.
And you might take advantage of those people that are old school thinking, where it's like if there's that size there, that's where it's such a defect, and that old school thinking. But I don't think Pat Verbeek's in that old school type of thinking, because he was a smaller guy himself. So maybe take advantage of people that have that preconceived notion of smaller dudes not being able to compete as well.
Yeah, he seems to have an issue with the size for the forwards. He mentioned that he likes the bigger defensemen and guys that can
push people around.
But for the forwards, it doesn't seem necessarily to be an issue with him.
Yeah, I don't think straight sizes. I think, his comments at the end of the year about the younger kids was like, we want them to fill out. And I think that's where he's at, right? Because you can, even when you just see him, he's a solidly built guy. He's not, he's obviously not very tall, but he's not someone that you're going to push around.
Jagger Fergus at 154 pounds.
Right.
He's at 180 pounds at 5'10", which is a lot more manageable.
Yeah. And so I think you're 100% right. I think, I could easily see a situation where Savoie and Nazar fall out of the top 10 just because they're small, and Connor Geekie goes 7 to Ottawa. You know what I mean? Something like that. I don't think that's
Geekie and
that's out
Kasper
of...
start jumping up because of their size, maybe a little bit. Yeah. Okay, Krasinski. Get back to him. He's kind of my lock for 10. I depends who's there. That like any draft. I think if Nazar's there, I'd probably lean a little bit towards that just for the upside on forward, and you can grab a defenseman later. I think when you look at more so what's available at 22, that's what leans me a little bit towards the defenseman. At 10, if the forward that you kind of want isn't there, I really like the upside from Korchinski. He's a guy that is probably the top offensive defenseman in this draft, which again, lately that's usually the guys who are 5'10", 5'11", 6 foot. They've got a lot of speed, but the size is an issue, so they fall a little bit. With his case, he's 6'2", 185 pounds, and he's a transition machine. He makes the best first pass. He attacks players, but he does it in a smart way where he anticipates which way they're going to go. He cuts back the other way, and he finds the right pass. He's got an excellent stretch pass. He utilized that just to an insane extent. Like the amount of stretch passes I saw every time I watched him for Seattle this year was just insane. And he put up the most points of any CHL defenseman. I think it was like 65 points through 67 games. He only had 4 goals, and so 61 of those were assists. But he's got, just despite the 4 goals, he's got a pretty good shot. He just doesn't really use it that much. He doesn't shoot the puck that much. He likes to kind of attack play, make the pass first before taking the shot. But I think it's something you could work on. If he becomes a power play quarterback eventually for the right team, that one-timer and that shot will get refined, especially for a guy who's 6'2". My thing with him is you take all those transition and the fact that he's 6'2", and you don't see too many players who are as good at that transition game at his size, is that before the pandemic he was 5'10". He grew 4 inches in the off season that they didn't play to 6'2". He comes out this year, puts up insane numbers, 4 inches taller, learning his skating stride got better. He became one of the best skaters for a defenseman in the draft. Like, he just stretched out and it just worked. Like, his skating just kind of fell into place. But the downside with him is that he's a really bad defender right now. It's just like he's not great. But I'm not worried about it because he was 5'10" the last time we looked at him. Not many 5'10" defensemen are really great defenders, especially at that age, like at a 16-year-old age, going against some of the bigger guys in that league. Then he comes in, really no work on that, is 4 inches taller, and is still not a great defenseman. He's got a longer reach. He's got to kind of work and figure out how to utilize that, how to kind of operate as a bigger defenseman now. I think you can coach all that. I think you can work him into being at least an average defender, if not better, once he kind of fills out a little bit. And again, he's lanky at 285 pounds. So he gets a little bit closer to 190, 200. He could be 6'3", 6'4" by the time he makes the NHL as well. I think there's a really, really high reward, but it's a high risk again, because you're risking in the sense that maybe he doesn't figure it out. Maybe he really just is a bad defender, and he never.
But now he's just a really tall, bad defender.
Yeah, he just becomes. He's great offensively, but that comes at the cost of him being out of position. Making, putting his teammates in bad spots. But the offense is great. The transition plays.
Put him with Drysdale. We're good.
Yeah, but like he could if he figures it out just averagely defensively, which I think with the right coaching he can, you get a potential top pairing of Korchinski and Drysdale where they could be two of the best transition defensemen in the NHL. There's something to be said about that, and I mean he has shades a little bit of Shea Theodore coming from the same program in Seattle, where they look like they could be very similar players. I think the high upside for him is to become a Shea Theodore type player, which I think is obviously appealing for a lot of Ducks fans. I just really, really like the way he controls the game offensively, and in a future power play quarterback as a left shot defenseman. I think the Ducks don't really have that. He kind of becomes what you hoped Cam Fowler would be on the power play, just with a lot more puck skills and hockey sense, and not that Cam Fowler really lacks that, but there's just that offensive upside that I think of all the defensemen available in this draft, even Nemec and Jiricek, I think he has the potential to be 5-10 years down the road the defenseman who is the 40-50 point defenseman power play quarterback. I think he's the only guy that profiles potentially to be that. And again, the only detriment is the defensive side of things, and that seems to be the case for Matechuk as well as Mintyukov. Is the defense is the issue. These guys are offensive juggernauts, but Matechuk's 5'11". Whether that's going to work out or not, I don't know. And for Mintyukov, he's kind of been big, and he tries to play bigger than he is. And I don't know if you can work that, right? Like, I feel like there's a workable thing from a guy who went from 5'10", to 6'2" in a year, didn't get to play in between that, and is figuring things out. I think there's a workable project there. That's why I have him as kind of my ideal pick at number 10.
Yeah, I think Pronman had the comp for him as Shane Gostisbehere, which that, tall Gostisbehere, call Yandel. I think that's Gostisbehere. And I think that's kind of, what you hope the floor is that he's a second pair offensive defenseman. The upside is Shea Theodore and him using that height and his wingspan and his stick and his skating to shut down on gaps, make, stop plays in transition and things like that. But Korchinski's really interesting. The size and the growth happening so quickly, to me, like you said, I think that's one of the things that helps kind of alleviate some of the defensive concerns, just because it just changes the way you play. Like 4 inches is not insignificant, you know what I mean? And just what that does for his ability to, stop plays and shut down plays and increase his reach, I think is pretty good. But I think it's interesting, right? Because I think you can look at the 22 pick and you can find guys that are that kind of defender or that kind of offensive player. And I think, to me, the question at 10 between the offense and the defenseman, which is the more complete skill set you want, right? Because, I know it's an insane thing, but, you could, I guess, maybe trade back from 10, or even at 10, just take Leon Michel, who's 6'5", really good skater. He's got some nastiness to him. He's a left-handed guy. He can skate well. He seems like the kind of guy, Pronman has his comp as Keandre Miller. That's the kind of guy that you can play with Drysdale, right? If you have that bigger, meaner, nastier guy to play with Drysdale, but he can keep up skating-wise, and not, again, Jamie Drysdale is an incredible skater, so I don't expect Michel to do that, but he's not gonna fall behind and look like, somebody's 80-year-old grandpa trying to catch up. And I think, that is very enticing. There's questions about Michel's upside as far as offense and how much of it will translate, but, I don't know. It's hard for me. I just think the opportunities at the end of the draft are really interesting because you've got potentially Lambert, you've got McGroarty, you've got Furcus, you've got Sneverin. There are guys at 22 that make sense to take a defenseman, like you're saying, at 10 with Korchinski, Matechuk. And it's just a really interesting thing to me. And I think the 2 picks, more than any other year to me, feels like they are interdependent. Like what you do with one probably dictates what you do with the other. And it's just interesting because I don't ever feel like that was really the case before. Like even in the Perreault draft, it was like, okay, we got Perreault at 29 or whatever, and then they took, I think that was the year they took OZ.
No. The Perreault draft was Zegras at 9.
Zegras
at 9 and Perreault at 23.
Who did they take in the second round?
It might have been. Yeah, I think it was. No, Zellweger was last year.
So it would have been what, like Lacombe or Thrun?
I think it was Lacombe. Yeah.
Yeah. So, anyways, but I don't feel like any of the picks before have been as interconnected because they were far enough back at the end of the draft to where it's like, you're not getting maybe a guy who's going to fall out of the lottery.
Yeah, I think the thing for 10 that I prefer is that high upside. I'm willing to absorb the risk in some cases, and we'll break down these other defensemen as well and kind of what the difference of risk is there. But I think the risk, as high as that risk is of him being a bad defender, I think it's workable more so than the other guys in Mintyukov and Matechuk. And I think the fact that he grew 4 inches and the offense stayed and it got better and it still worked, he still was able to manage that, then the defense comes next. I think you can coach that. I think I'd rather take the guy with as high an upside as potentially to be the best defenseman or the best puck-moving and offensive defenseman from this draft than to take the safe pick at 10, like a Bichelle, where he's going to be 6'5", he's a defensive defenseman, the offense might be not there, He's going to be, a 3 at worst, but is the offense going to translate? I don't think you can teach the offensive skill that Krasinski and Manichuk and Mintyukov have. That's just, big physical gifts that they have. I don't think you can teach that as much as you can teach a guy who's just grown 4 inches to play defense a little bit better and use his size to his advantage. Okay, I'm gonna lay out. We laid out Krasinski. I'm gonna lay out Mintyukov. Gonna lay out Manichuk and their skill sets and how they're different and similar. What their concerns are, and then Jay, Steven, your pick on kind of which guy you're more comfortable taking and among those kind of profiles of players. We looked at Krasinski, a guy who kind of just grew into the size, one of the best transition defenders, but defensively he's just kind of a mess right now. You've got Mintyukov, who I guess up there again is one of the top offensive defensemen. He's a bit more chaotic, I guess you could call it. Like he's controlled chaos in a sense. Like he gets forward. He's a great transition player. He makes the right pass. He's really creative. He's got some of the best puck skills and puck moving ability in the draft. He's a really, really good skater. He's got some decent size at 6'1", 192. But the decision making is kind of the main issue there. He just defensively, he's kind of too focused on what he's going to do when he gets the puck, rather than focusing on the defender. He's really reactive defensively because he is focused on, okay, when I get the puck, I'm going to do this. He's kind of reckless in his zone exits. He's trying to make the big play. He's trying to make the big hit, puts himself out of position, puts his teammates in bad spots by doing so. And there's this comparison that I highlighted and read here. It's reminiscent to watching Rasmus Ristolainen with the Buffalo Sabres, in the sense that he's always looking to make the big play. He's looking to make the big hit. He's looking to make the skilled play. And it ends up working sometimes, and it looks great. A lot of times it doesn't work, or it puts his teammates in bad positions. So he
misses more than he hits, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and he's got the skill to make it happen. But yeah, you can do that as a 6'1", 192-pound defenseman against OHL junior competition. That doesn't fly at the NHL level necessarily. And can you coach that decision making into him? Can you sit him down and say, hey, listen, this is, show him as many times as you can. This play where you went and tried to make the big hit, no, you can't do that. And sit him down. It's going to take a lot of video room work with him to get it done. It can. And if it does, I think he's potential to be one of the better defensemen outside of Jiricek and Nemec. But there is that concern where it's not the inability to play defense, it's just the poor decision making and wanting to make the big play and wanting to make the big individual play and not really thinking about the defensive side of the game. It's always, okay, I'm focused on the puck and what I'm going to do when I get the puck. And then
sometimes that's like instincts. So his instinct is to do that play, and sometimes you can coach it out of him, sometimes you can't.
Yeah, we've seen that with a lot of defensemen where it just never happens. And, their projection of being a top 4 guy, they fall into that kind of fringe NHL player, because when they get the puck on their stick, they can make magic, but the decision-making and the focus on the defensive side of the game just isn't there. And then for Manichuk, he is insane the way he plays defense. There's not a lot of guys. I think there's really no comparables for the way he plays. The way that the team plays fits really well with him. So if you get the right system, he could do really well, but he's smaller of the 3 of them. He's 5'11", 194 pounds. So he's built well, but shorter, under 6 foot. Maybe he could, when he gets to the NHL level, it could grow into 6 foot, 6'1". Yeah. But he's just so interesting because it's reckless in the same sense of Mintyukov, but he is the focal point of everything. He had more touches than any WHL defenseman. It was like 150 puck touches he averages per game, which is more than 50 above the average top pairing defenseman in the league. So he is the go-to guy in all situations. There are times where he's leading the rush in front of the first forward. When he gets in the offensive zone, he becomes the primary puck mover, which you don't really see from a defenseman, which at times, a lot of times, puts him out of position. Because if you mess up, he's got the skill to, most of the time it's going to work and he can set up plays. But if he loses the puck or, it doesn't work, you're out of position at that point. You've left your defense pair in a bad spot. So that's kind of been the tough thing with him, but just such a great breakout player. His skating, because of is the hallmark of his game, because he can do all that. It centers around his skating, his mobility, his agility. But the problem, again, is whether you can have that, whether you can do that at the NHL level. It's great that you can do that at junior, and you can take advantage of the skill gap between players. But there are not many systems in the NHL that are going to allow you to do that. There are not many coaches who are going to allow you as a defenseman to be that guy that leads the rush as a defenseman. We haven't seen it, right? Like, even Makar, as good as he is, there's an understanding that you can't do that all the time. We've seen him go coast to coast and make that, but you can't look to do that on every play, right?
He picks it out when it's right.
Yeah, and that's the thing you're going to have to work with him. And the problem I think that a lot of people have is when you take that away, does that limit his game? Can he do everything else? Can he rein it in a little bit that it's manageable, that we can get these flashes of this, and he can utilize that offensive skill in a bit more of a less chaotic way than you do at junior. And it's impossible to project with him because you'd really never seen it. We've never seen a guy kind of do that and play defense the way he does. He's actually a pretty decent defender. I think of the three of them, he's probably, even though he's smaller, he's a bit more refined defenseman. His back skating isn't great, but he makes good decisions defensively. It's just that chaotic nature of his offense where he needs to be involved in everything for it to work, that there's a concern about, can that project at the NHL level? And even if it does, are you going to get into a system or a coach that works for? Because you essentially have to build your breakout in your team around him doing that if he's going to come to the NHL and do that. So out of those guys, we've got the kind of chaotic, decent defender, a little bit undersized, but can he mold his game to the NHL level in Matechuk? We've got Mintyukov, who is a great transition defender, but he plays with this kind of nonchalant care about defense, not really a thought to it. It's more about focus on the when he's going to get the puck rather than, okay, let's focus on actually winning this battle and getting the puck first. And for Kaczynski, it's the probably the best refined offensive production of the game, but he hasn't figured out how to play defense with those extra 4 inches yet. Who are you more comfortable taking out of those three guys?
Kaczynski.
Yeah.
I would say you add 4 inches to your height. That's going to add length to your limbs, length to your legs. All of a sudden, he's a little bit better skater, and maybe he figures out defensively what you couldn't do at 5'10", you can do at 6'2", and then all of a sudden that gap control is a little bit better. You realize that you can make that move to the side, cut off players, a little bit more well-rounded, just physically in size and reach. So if he's already still got that offense going, and we haven't seen what he can do with that new height and that new reach, I'd much rather take what I know I'm going to get out offensively, and that size. You can't teach size, but I feel like we haven't had a chance to maybe really watch what he can do defensively now.
Yeah. Next season is the big telling point for Kaczynski.
Well, you got to pick him now.
Yeah, you got to pick him now. So you can't wait. That season where he grew 4 inches and didn't get to play would have been great because you could have been able to see what he could do.
Okay, now I know what we got. Yeah.
But yeah, so that that's a tough win for all these guys. Is next season's huge. Can you make that development defensively? But Steven, who would you take out of those three guys if you had to take one of them at 10?
I think I would take Korchinski because he seems, like I said at the beginning, we were talking about like questions I had going into this process, right? Like, I love Zellweger, man. I hope he makes it. I'm still not sure that he's going to do it. You know what I mean? I just think it's really, really hard to be a 5'10", 5'9" defenseman. And if you can get a guy with similar offensive dynamism, then you can kind of, just pick up that extra height. I think you have to go Korchinski there. I think for me, there are, like I said, I think there's some defensemen later in the round, even if it's in a couple picks later, like Pickering or some of those guys that I think I would naturally be a little bit more inclined to go after, especially with some of the forwards available at 10. But I don't think Korchinski would be a bad pick.
Yeah.
Just because he would provide another offensive defenseman who could, could take a pair over, right? You could put him and Drysdale on separate lines, and now you've got guys who can skate the puck up the ice, create offense on on different pairs.
Yeah.
And maybe you play Korchinski, with Hellison, right? And you have someone with a little bit more of that discipline, a little bit more of that gap control. Hellison's got decent size. He's supposed to be a good skater. So I think Korchinski would be the one out of the three. I like the recklessness a little bit of, who was it? Minchuk?
Matichuk, yeah.
Matichuk, yeah. I just like that kind of recklessness. I think it's fun to have guys who are a little crazy. I just think sometimes when you have guys that don't think or play true to the center, I think you can get really interesting opportunities to break plays wide open. Now it can go the other way against you, like you said, but I do think there is something to be said for a guy who's just going to operate in a way you're not expecting.
Yep. And
what that means for his ability to impact a game.
Yeah. I really like Denton Matichuk. The problem for me, I don't know how he fits the system if all things pan out for the Ducks. Again, you have Drysdale 5'11", Zellweger 5'10", Matichuk 5'11", and they all are the guy that want to have the puck on their stick, taking the puck up the ice and being that guy. And Matichuk takes that to like 10 times above that, where he needs to be the guy that gets all the touches. I don't know how that works, and I think he needs the right system and the right coach for that to work, and I don't know if that's in Anaheim, because I do think if he doesn't, it couldn't work out for him. He could be one of those players where, again, the actual change of scenery potentially does work, and he goes to a team that knows how to utilize him. But I don't know if I'd rather take the risk in the player figuring out, his size and how to play defense, and everything else, like he can play in any system and that it's going to work, versus having to build around this guy when you already have players who kind of do the same thing. And we spent half an hour talking about take the best player available and don't worry about how they fit in the system. But I think with him specifically, because of the way he plays, that he kind of needs to be that guy. And we've already got two guys who kind of project at maybe a bit of a lower level to do that. It's tough for me to pick him. He'd be my second one, and I think Mantukov is a great pick. Also, like, I'm not saying because he's the third of the three that he's not a great pick. He really is a good player, and he can figure things out. And you can sit him down in the video room and go over what's wrong, and if he's got the commitment, he can make it work. I think all three could be really good defensemen. But yeah, I think Korchinski seems right now for me to be the top of the three. Okay, we only got a couple more guys. I was going to mention Jonathan Lekkerimäki, but he is really similar to Kemmel, one of the best shots in the draft. Good skill, defense is okay, but he's just a bit smaller at 5'11", Swedish winger. So he really is kind of like Kemmel. They're very similar in that instance, good one-timer. So we'll skip over him. The last two guys we have left, we'll finish with Brad Lambert, because that's the most intriguing one, but we've already talked about this guy a little bit, Connor Geekie. Probably unique of any of the guys we talked about. There's no similarities between some of the other guys we talked about. Maybe you could say a bit closer to Gauthier and Casper in a sense, but 6'4", 205 center, a bit of a safer pick, projects as probably a middle six, third line, second line center. But his skill, I think, is what sets him apart, where Casper and Gauthier didn't really necessarily have that playmaking and that game-breaking skill. For a guy at 6'4", he's got the puck skills of some of the guys we've talked about that are around 5'10", 5'11". He's a really, really good playmaker. He's got just an exceptional hockey sense. He knows how to make the right plays. He's got good hands for a kid as big as him. He is a great two-way player. He's still kind of figuring out, again, how to use that size to his advantage, but it projects well to the NHL level that he's going to be a strong kind of off-puck defender, that he can play down the middle. It's not an argument like it is with Casper and Gauthier that they could be a winger, they could be a center. I think for him, he's going to be a center. If he plays at the NHL level, it is going to be down the middle. He's got a pretty good shot. He's got good in close work with his hands to make good moves. There was a toe drag he made earlier in the season where he had like a second to get it off. He chipped it over the goaltender's stick one time to put it in the back of the net in front of the net. So he is got really good close work hands. He reminds me a bit of like Getzlaf, not to the same point, but again, a bigger guy, good playmaker, good puck handling ability for a guy of his size. But then, the skating, again, is the issue with him. He needs to work on that. His agility isn't that great. He relies too frequently on the passing and the playmaking sometimes, where he could probably shoot the puck or make the safe play. He's kind of looking to make the highlight reel play. But yeah, for him, I think the reason, at one point he was touted to be a top 5 guy or a top 10 guy, and the reason he's kind of fallen a bit is that skating and whether that can get to a level where it's at least NHL average to kind of highlight the rest of his skills.
Yeah, he's an interesting one because everything about his game is right? He's got size, he's got creativity. He looks like a guy who could learn to use his size, like you said with Ryan Getzlaf, to make up for the fact that his skating isn't the strongest and do kind of, like boxing out and posting up kind of things on the half walls as far as distributing and different things like that. But I think more than anything, the fact that he is going to be a center makes him an interesting choice, but not the most desirable to me. I think there are other centers who are a little bit more dynamic that I would be more inclined to take, or guys who I can see moving to the wing and it not being an issue.
Yeah.
Whereas with Geekie, I don't know what happens. Like, can you move Geekie to the wing? Probably. Is that what you're going to want to do? Not really, if skating's not as strong as point. It's easier to have him in the middle and be able to distribute forward than have him on the wing and, try to have him getting pucks in deep and skating and retrieving pucks and, using his feet more than he should have to.
Yeah, I think for him, like, if he has the potential, if he reaches, if he works on that skating and the offense translates and, he can become a high level, puck moving big man center at the NHL level, like he could be a 60 to 70 point player because he does have that individual skill.
Mm-hmm.
It's whether either the skating translates to get at least to an average level that he can keep up with guys in the NHL and at least drive play himself, or that playmaking ability is so good that he can offset that. We've seen big guys that really can't skate that well offset it with just an exceptional level of skill, and you put them with the right players and things get done. So he does have that upside in him, and the good thing is that if he doesn't hit, he's still likely to be like a 3C, even if the skating doesn't get to a level where it needs to be. Like he still, because of the size and the smarts and the playmaking ability he has, he should still be a pretty reliable good player at the NHL level, just maybe not that top tier where it's worth taking him at 10.
Yeah, I mean, we saw with Pastujov, right, that you can use creativity and skill to, in hockey sense, to work around the issues that you have with skating. And the advantage that Geekie has is that he's much bigger than Pastujov, so he's got that size to be able to use. He's got reach and things like that. As we also saw with Pastujov, as the year went on, the scoring dropped off and things like that because it can just be streaky. And when you have something that is a weakness like skating, it can make it a little bit harder to find that consistency just because you're struggling a little bit to get up and down the ice or you're caught out of position here and there. So
I agree with you guys. So, yeah.
Okay, well.
All right, bold prediction. Shane Wright drops to number 22 and we snag him.
Hey, not bad.
Huh?
Not bad at
Just
all.
live in that fantasy world.
Okay, we're gonna do a brief conversation about trades after this. We have one player left to profile for 10, and it's probably the most polarizing player in the draft. And then we'll talk some trades a little bit. We've kind of talked about it a little bit, but just kind of a nice wrap up on what we could see happen. Gibson, Chychrun moving up in the draft. A few other guys we could see target, but the player we got to talk about is Brad Lambert. At one point before this year, the guy who was supposed to be the one who could rival Shane Wright for the number 1 overall pick. And I don't think it's been a while since I've seen a guy that highly touted, just the wheels completely fall off. And now there's questions, is he going to even be a first round pick? Is he going to make that point? And there's no question that he is the best skater in this draft. And he has probably the highest hockey sense in terms of just individual puck skills and individual skill of anyone. Frank Nazar, Wright, Cooley, all of them. Like, he is probably the most skilled player. The problem is, can't really put it together to get the offensive production. He's playing in the top league in Finland, so it's always tough to produce. So he's not going to be 90 points in 50 games like Shane Wright. But the production just wasn't there. He went from one team to another team. The production got worse because he left that team to get more ice time and better opportunities, and it didn't really work. He was playing about 14 minutes a night in a men's league. He's not small, so again, he's 6 feet, 183 pounds. So it's not like, again, with some of these guys, the skating is great, but they're shorter. So he does have the size. There's just this inability to understand why he can't put it all together. Why he can be the best. There's no debate that he is the best skater and one of the most skilled players in the draft, but he puts up 10 points in 49 games and then 15 points in 46 games the season prior to that. Like he got worse in terms of his production versus the year before that. There's no real understanding for why he can't do it. He does, again, sometimes try to make the difficult play to the highlight reel play too much, and when you're playing in a men's league, like, you can't do that. We've seen guys at the junior level where they do that, but it pays off because the skill level isn't there. I think he's trying to do that in a league that's just not going to fly. And you cannot pull off the highlight reel play as a 17, 18-year-old playing 14 minutes a night on the third line against guys who've been playing this league for 10 years and at some point have either had a sniff at the NHL or played in the NHL or right out on the cusp of being that good. I don't think it could fly. And it's just so polarizing that you can be that skilled but not put it all together.
It's all right. We already got Sam Steele.
Yeah. There is kind of some similarities there, right? Like the skills that he had at the junior level and then not being able to put it together and not figuring out. He had the production, but again, he was playing in junior. But it's just it's so weird, and I haven't seen a fall like this from a player who is supposed to potentially go number one or at least number two at the very least, to still have that speed. That it's not like that fell off. To have that skill, to show flashes of that skill, but the production is there. You just cannot put it together. You can't seem to get that consistency where it puts you in that top tier of player.
Yeah, and I'm always scared about those players because, like, well, it's all kind of there. Maybe it just needs the right fit, and then that right fit never happens, and it just never translates. And especially if he went from one area and then he went to a new league to try and, that was supposed to help that offensive upside, and it still didn't happen. How are you going to take that guy and then go like, all right, well, now we're going to put you in the AHL. Now we're going to put you in the NHL. How, if it's already not transferring very well between, it's risky. So, I mean, that's probably why they end up dropping potentially out of the first round. I mean, it's a great skater is all, but he's either got to redefine that role that he was gearing up for, and lower that expectation as far as his offensive output, or something's got to click. But you kind of take a risk if you're looking for, he's a top skater in the draft. He should be a great first-round pick, and you kind of shy away from it.
Yeah, I don't know if it's a fair comparison, but like the thing that way back the Sens pick, Alexander Dager or French name, like where where he had the skill, he was very quick, but like the to be able to put it all together in a package where it makes sense, just it didn't materialize for him.
I think it's Daig is what they use. Alexander Daig.
Yeah, like Lambert has the skill, like we said, has the speed, tries to make the highlight reel play every time. That doesn't work. But then there's a sense, like, does he have the hockey sense to understand how to use that skill set? Like, he's got the physical gifts to be very quick and have quick hands and make the highlight reel play. But does he understand when to use it and how to utilize that skill set properly? I think that's the big concern of why he's fallen so much, and what people are putting into why the production isn't there is, does he even know how to put it all together? And if he doesn't, how do you coach that? Like, I don't think you can. Like, how do you get him to put that all together and understand that? Because you can't really teach somebody in a sense, hockey sense, right? Like, how do you teach him to put that all together in a package that makes sense, and how he can utilize that at the NHL level? And he's the biggest wild card on draft day, because he could still go in the top 10, but he could also go in the second round. I don't remember a prospect where I've ever said, yeah, they could go in the top 10, but he could easily fall out of the first round if nobody likes him. It just takes that one team that really thinks they can work on it and fix him. But I don't know. He's apparently going to play in the WHL next year. Seattle acquired his rights, so maybe that changes things. but it doesn't help fix things. He goes from playing in a pro league to playing against kids again, and he can just do everything that he's still doing, and that probably works better in the WHL and it looks better. But again, when you get to the NHL level, you still can't do that. So it's so tough. At one point, I was in the boat saying, if he's there at 10, take him.
Mm-hmm.
And now, going and looking at some of the clips and reading some more reports on him and what the issues are, I don't know if you touch him. Maybe you take him at 22, and if you think you can work on him, but I just don't know. I don't know how you help him put it all together. I don't know how you can do that. I've never seen anybody try to piece that together like that.
Yeah, it's kind of like I said. It's kind of like the Sam Steele thing. It's he's there. It should be working, and it's not, and you can't figure out why. And so there's that risk of frustration or not panning out. Do you risk a first round pick, one of you two, on that possibility? So
yeah, it's the highest of rewards and the highest of risks, because he could be the best player from this draft, and he could also not make the NHL. It's the complete polar ends of the spectrum there. And I again, like I've said, I don't think I've ever seen that gap in you could be number one or you could be 0 games in the NHL. Like it's unbelievable.
Yeah, I think for me because I know that when we first started talking about some of this draft and the prospects and stuff, like, Brad Lambert isn't a real person, obviously. But, I was on that train with you, man. Like, the raw tools are there. The ability is there. I'd rather take a risk on someone with the phenomenal upside and the incredible athleticism that he has. And, I've just started talking myself out of it. And part of it is, like we've said a couple times already, like, we know that the two things that are really important to Verbeek are compete level and hockey sense. And he doesn't have either of those. It seems to be an issue on both levels. And the thing for me, like Jason was saying, is like, can he put it all together? Like, the question, like, it just gets, like, you can't not have both of those. You can be super smart and have issues with compete, and it's just about getting you to engage and stay active and engaged. Or you can have, minimal hockey sense and incredible compete, and now you're out there, doing kind of what Brett talks about, right? Which is just out-efforting everybody. But with the level of athleticism that he has, you can get more out of that compete. You can pull more out of it, because you can beat guys on a straight line skate. You have the ability to go wide and wrap around, like the skating and the stick handling and stuff like that. Like, it's all there. The question is just what happens when he gets to the other end of the ice, and he's almost like just skating into the boards.
Yeah.
It's hard. Like, to me, yeah, even at 22, I think there are other players. Like, this is insane, but I'd almost rather take Jagger Firkus. I just like that kid's his build, like not his build, but like his
He's put it all together. It's just for him, it's the size. He knows how to play the game, and he knows how to put his skill set together.
Attitude, right? Like, I think we talked about this before, but like, I love that they were like, "Are you worried about being too small?" He's like, "No, I've been small my whole life. I don't give a shit. Like, this is who I am. Like, you don't think I can play? That's fine. But like, this isn't new to me." And I love that, man. I love that so much more than someone who has all these raw gifts and just seems to have this level of apathy about it. And I was, like I said, I was big on taking him earlier. Part of that made me think about it is the NFL draft and Houston taking the kid Stingley, 2nd or 3rd overall, I can't remember. And he was one of those guys that, like, at LSU, they were worried about because he looked disengaged and stuff. And it's just like, well, he basically was the best corner in his conference his rookie year or his freshman year. So, what is it? And I was like, oh, maybe that's what it is for Lambert. Maybe he's not engaging because he doesn't feel like it's a difficulty thing, but he's not producing enough for that to be the thing you're looking at, right? The numbers don't really track with that being the case.
You could be really good, put up a lot of numbers, and just be disengaged because it's too easy. Like, we felt that was the case in a sense for Jacob Perreault, where when he was playing in Sarnia, the team wasn't good. He was really good. He was putting up numbers, but he just didn't care, it seemed like. And now he's kind of adjusted that in the AHL, but Lambert's not putting up points. So it's not even like he's producing at a high level and he could just be like, yeah, this doesn't matter. Like, and it's shown in his falling of his stock. I have no idea where he'll go on draft day. I don't think he gets taken in the top 10, but there will be a team with a couple picks, maybe Arizona or somebody like that, who ends up taking him and just swings for the fences and hopes. And like I could honestly see Arizona doing it because they have nothing to build from right now. They're starting from scratch. You got to a 50. I forget what their second pick is, like between 15 and 20, I think. Just do it. Take the shot. You're gonna get Cooley probably at 3. Hope that he hits. If he doesn't, whatever. Like, it's the first year of your rebuild. Go for those guys who could be the best players in the draft if you're a team like that.
Me. I feel like Arizona's been in rebuild for 5 years, and they're going to be in rebuild for the next 5 years.
That's why they got to take a shot on.
I just want the Ducks to take, at number 22, this guy, Jimmy Snuggerud.
Yeah.
Snuggerud. I just want that name. I just got to see it on the back of a jersey. And then listen to Hayward or Allers have to say Snuggerud every time. That's what I want for number 22.
All right, so that's our projections for 10. If you remember the guys that we talked about, if you had to pick a guy of those guys to take at 10, who you taking? Steve, Jay, you still going with Casper at 10?
Marcos, was he?
Marco Casper, yeah.
Yeah, that's him. Yeah,
Okay.
I'd take him for sure.
Steven, who would you take of all those guys at 10 if you had the pick?
Realistically.
I'm going to say I would probably take Frank Nazar. I think the upside is way too high, and I think the downside is minimal.
Yeah. I think if he's there, it'd be tough to not take him for Nazar. If not, for me, it's Krasinski, and I maybe Casper. Like, I do really like that side, everything that he brings. I just don't know. The upside for me is the only concerning part is I like the high upside, even if there's a risk with some of these guys. But he just, what you're going to get with him, and it is a really nice pick to take. You're going to get a guy who's going to work hard and he's going to play it for your team.
And that's what you need in a second or third line dude.
Yeah.
You got to have one of those guys.
Yeah.
At least one.
Yeah, I mean, I think the top two for me would be those two, Casper and Nazar. Okay.
All right, trades. We talked about it a little bit. We discussed moving up and moving into it. Maybe not so much moving up in picks, but of players we could get rid of, players we could acquire. We've talked Gibby. Do you think Gibby gets moved at the draft? Because I think that's the only logical place he gets moved. I think if he doesn't get moved at the draft, it's really hard to go into free agency where teams are going to go out and get those goaltenders, the Kempers, the Fleuries, the Campbells, and make a trade, because the market is going to slowly start going away when they start signing goaltenders in free agency and getting desperate.
Yeah, I'm 50-50 on if Gibby gets moved. Like, I think it all comes down to what Verbeek wants to do, and if he really, the thing is, like, whoever's going to want to take him is going to be pretty close to the cap. Like, they're just missing a goalie or something like that, and even for it to work, you're actually moving up relative standards. What the team has, you're moving out a lot of money, and we got to hit the floor. We're not even at the floor yet. So a lot of what you're going to do is, all right, I've got to move them, but I'm also going to have to probably retain some money. And who wants to do that for the next 5 years, to have another goalie play against you? So especially someone like that. So I can see both sides of it. It just depends if Verbeek is ready to move on from Gibson, and his plan is Dostal's coming in. Stolars can hold the fort down in the meantime, and I can get King's ransom for what I'm going to get for Gibby, because it's going to have to be probably a lot of prospects, again, draft picks, and then some sort of cruddy goalie in return.
Yeah, I liked the thought Eric Stevens put forward of the 2-10 swap with Blackwood and Gibby. I think that makes sense for both teams. I think the other one for me is Philly. I think if Anaheim took back James Van Riemsdyk,
they got Carter Hart, and that's all they care about.
But yeah. I don't know that they do. But here's my thing. They want to compete right now, and Carter Hart has been inconsistent. Now, I do think John Tortorella is going to put a team in front of him structurally that will help him improve. But I also think you could just as easily make that same argument for Gibson and say the downside is a lot lower, because there's a little bit more proof of concept with Gibby. It's been a couple of years, I get that. But I really do think he would bounce back incredibly strong behind a John Tortorella team. So, maybe if it helps them move out a guy like Van Riemsdyk in the process, right? Maybe you do it like, Gibby and Comtois for Van Riemsdyk and Hart and 5 or something like that, right? Like, I don't know. Maybe that makes sense. Maybe you send like Callie Klang the other way or somebody like Eriksson Ek, as far as like having a young up-and-coming goaltender to give them to replace Hart, but also giving them a guy who's a quality starter. It feels...
Go ahead.
What were you going to say, Jay?
I just don't see it. I think they're all in on Carter Hart. I think they realize that they haven't necessarily given him the support system. And then maybe that changes to Tortorella. But even then, putting Gibby in instead of Hart isn't going to solve their problems. Their problems are systematic versus the goaltending talent. So I don't think Gibby solves that problem. And then what are you going to do if you have Hart and Gibson? What are you doing for the next 5 years? Someone's got to go.
The Flyers don't have a lot of time. They've got to figure something out soon.
That's the problem, is they have been told from ownership or from whoever's in charge, like, because I think they're technically run by like Time Warner Cable or some shit, or NBC, something like that. It doesn't matter.
Sure.
Yeah. Anyways, but like they seem to be saying like, we're not rebuilding, we're doing this, and Sean Couturier isn't getting younger. They just signed Rasmus Ristolainen into that ridiculous extension. Like, I don't know that this team is thinking clearly, and I think the allure of a player like John Gibson could be enough to make somebody do something silly. I agree with you. I don't think John Gibson fixed their problems. But I don't know.
He's more likely to go to Toronto, I would assume, and we could possibly get something good back from that. But then once again, it's just...
I think Toronto is the least likely of all the places that have an opening. Because I just don't think...
They're not high on Campbell. So...
Campbell, no.
Yeah, I think they can't afford him. The thing with me for Toronto is they're in a very tough spot, not really being able to afford anybody. Like, they can't even discuss really bringing Campbell back. Any trade for any goaltender... is going to involve Mrazek going back the other way because they decided to sign him to like a $3.8 million deal, which is so stupid. There's not a lot of contracts.
But he was so good that one time in Carolina.
Yeah, I didn't understand. They thought it would make sense with Campbell only making 3.5, that the two of them making like 7 whatever combined would be enough to get a cup and they wouldn't care about it. Didn't work out for them. So with Toronto, he'd have to come back, which is fine. I mean, you could run
which is fine, but I think also the Ducks can make that work. To not only sweeten the deal, is they could take back some of John Gibson's contract because we're so far away from the floor that helps Toronto and also gives them another incentive for us to get a younger player, someone to take some more money off their hands, give them more mobility because they're not that far away. Not that John Gibson's the savior on it, but if you can't bring Campbell back, Mrazek's not your answer. Where are you going to go? And Gibby is on, relatively for his skill set, a relatively nice contract. And if the Ducks are taking some of that back,
1.5, like it makes it easier. I think there's only a handful of teams that could get John Gibson. I think Eric Stevens put an article where he'd identified 7 teams that the Ducks could go to. It was an article for the fourth period today that the Capitals, again, were one of the teams I think that Eric Stevens suggested as a team that would be interested in John Gibson. The thing for me, and it kind of lines with what you're saying, Jay, about why trade him if you're not getting anything decent in return for him, they have to get an offer that some team comes and gives you an offer you can't refuse. And there's a few teams out there I don't think they can do it. Like Washington, I don't know what they can offer. That is like, I got to trade John Gibson for that. Their prospect pool isn't that great. I'm not a huge fan of Connor McMichael and Hendrik Leperrier, who are their top 2 young players. The first round pick isn't super valuable. I think it's like 19 or something like that of where they draft, or maybe it's even later than that. And any of their later picks with John Gibson are going to be, you would assume, later than that one. Because John Gibson solves a lot of problems for them because Vanacek and Samsonov just did not pan out. Yeah, Samsonov. And you're taking one of those guys back, too. So maybe you take Samsonov and you run him with Stolars or whatever. You take Vanacek and they run Samsonov and Gibson. I don't know. I think that's the best fit for Gibson. I think it's a team that makes the most sense for him. The only problem, they don't really have anything that I think would be worth it for Anaheim to go get. You look Minnesota maybe, but I don't think they can afford him. You'd have to retain on that. They've got some good prospects, but I don't think that's going to make sense for them. And Fiala would have been a big piece that you say, okay, you could bring back, but now he's in LA, so that doesn't make a ton of sense. New Jersey we've talked about a little bit, Philadelphia, Toronto.
Real quick, I just want to say, because I was really curious about what you were saying about free agency and how that might affect whether or not he has to be moved at the draft. And I think normally that makes a lot of sense. It's a big contract. At least the player still has somewhat of a name. His name has been out there for a couple of years now. So I looked at the free agents, and the free agent pool is not good. Of goalies who played over 20 games.
Kemper, Fleury, Campbell.
And now Craig Anderson,
Holtby,
he's resigned.
DeSmith, Tokarski, Grease, Lankinen, Martin Jones, Ville Husso, Jack Campbell, Fleury, and Kemper.
Yeah, so Husso and those three, yeah, that's really
That's it.
And Husso is 1 year good. The rest, nothing to fall back on. That you're taking a gamble getting Ville Husso.
And Darcy Kemper is not good. He was barely good enough for them to win the Stanley Cup.
You mean Stanley Cup champion?
Yeah.
Darcy Kemper?
Yeah, the dude who was
good? Okay.
barely good enough to win the Stanley Cup.
Individually, I think with Colorado, it's so weird because Francouz looked amazing when they played, and I think Colorado is one of those teams that can get away not having a Vasilevsky. I think they can play without it. So I don't know what they're gonna do.
What did I tell you? What did I tell you the other day? The best goalie in the world for them, Freddie Anderson.
Yeah,
would be a perfect goalie for them.
The three-way trade we discussed is something like the three-way trade to go from 2 to 6 and 12 with Columbus.
Right,
it's one of those things that it makes sense. I get it. I think for Colorado they're in such an interesting position because I think Gibson could be a good fit for them. I think if the Ducks retain a little bit of salary on it, if they take back we talked about before, EJ and the $6 million he has next year. It frees up some cap space for them to go add somewhere else, to maybe bring Kadri back if they wanted to do that, even though I think he's going to go get paid and go somewhere else. But to mitigate that loss and add somebody else, there are some creative ways you could make a trade like that work, and then that gives Colorado their goaltender for the next 4 or 5 years that he's under contract to really make a run at it. I think the most likely option is Kemper comes back on a team-friendly deal and they just keep him. Or they go out and every year they just sign somebody else. They sign Fleury this offseason and run Fleury and Francouz, and when Fleury's gone next year, they go and get somebody else for 1 or 2 years, and they just try and cycle through that.
All right, you're in that.
Yeah, so they could do that, and
we'll take care of the rest.
And they just do a 1A, 1B with Francouz and whoever they get, and just hope that they're a good enough team that they can just have an average goaltender and make it work. I think it's possible, but I do think, if they want to make a swing of things, I don't see anybody enticing above Kemper in free agency, where the only real option to go out and get a good goaltender and trade for is John Gibson. And with Colorado, I think they have the assets to make it worthwhile for Anaheim. Their prospect pool has started to kind of go down a bit, but I think if you're the Ducks and you're retaining salary and taking EJ's contract back, I think that's where you could look at a player like Alex Newhook and be like, yeah, that's the guy we want if we're going to make this happen. Whether Colorado's willing to move on from a really good young player like that, that's going to be tough. But I think that's the type of deal. If you're Anaheim and you're going to move John Gibson, you got to get something worthwhile. You can't sit back and look at this trade, 3 or 4 years and have nothing to show for it. You need to get something. And even if that's only the main piece from the deal, and there's not much else to it other than Alex Newhook, that you got to do it, I think, at that point. But I just don't know if any team's going to come and offer what it would take to get them.
And the Ducks will be. I think the Ducks don't move them. In my opinion. I mean, there's always that chance if someone blows you out of the water, but I don't think anyone's going to do that. I don't think the fact that Gibby's numbers have been all that great the last 3 seasons, although in my opinion, not his fault. Mm-hmm. Or at least not a majority of his fault. It's the team in front of him. But the Ducks are fine going through this next year with him, and let everything else going to happen. And there's going to be teams next year that are going to be dying for a goalie. And once again, he's even more attractive to teams because now he's one less year on that, and now they need a goalie, and whatever didn't work out. So
as long
if it's
as he
not
has a
an
good year.
amazing deal right now, there's next year, and next year we'll be having the same conversation. If the Ducks are obviously not going to be in contention for the Cup this upcoming season, we're going to be right back. Well, we got this guy; he's still kind of viable, and definitely huge among GMs. Everyone holds him in high regard, even if some fans don't. So I don't feel like there's any pressure to do it, and I just don't think anyone's going to overpay at this point to make it happen. So
yeah, no, I
said 50-50
I completely
now,
agree.
51-49.
Yeah, I don't think there's any pressure for the Ducks to move him. I think if he doesn't play well next year, you run the risk of the value getting lower because then it's 4 straight seasons of not playing that great. But you are right. Like, it does just take one team to be in that same mindset that it's not him, it's the team in front of him, to come in and say, okay, we want this guy, even after potentially another bad season next year. The thing I like about this year is if you get the right offer, is that he is the only guy. Like, the free agent market is not hot for goaltenders. There's nobody really in there. There's not a lot of other goaltenders up for trade. There's a decent amount of teams looking for a goaltender, and he is the main name on the market. If you want a guy that can be like the guy, the starter for your team, he's the guy that you go get right now. I haven't looked at free agents next year. Who knows what other goaltenders will be available next year? But right now that he is that guy. He is the top goaltender available.
I think he'll be that guy next year.
He could be. He could be for sure. I have to look at who's free agents next year and what goaltenders could be available. You run the risk again of him having a bad season and more teams being like, okay, maybe this is who he is now, right? So. But you can move him. Like, you'll still be able to move him, right? Like, that's I agree with that. You don't move him unless the deal is worth it. You're not actively trying to get rid of him at this point. So I agree
great
with
position to
sense.
be in.
Yeah,
I could move a franchise goalie, but I don't really need to.
Yeah, as long as you
what do you got?
Want. And it sounds like that's what the way Verbeek is going to take it is.
Hopefully,
whether he gets the deal, he needs to get the right deal to move him. There's no pressure whatsoever.
Yeah.
But all right, let's talk about last thing, who the Ducks could get, some of the big names. Do you think they go out and make a move to bring a guy in? We've heard them linked to Chychrun. We've not really heard them linked to DeBrincat. We've kind of just associated with them with DeBrincat.
Hopefully, like it's a hope.
Yeah.
Wish list.
Yeah, and other than that, like, they haven't really been linked. Like, Fiala was one they were linked with for a bit, and then when it came down to the wire, they weren't. Yeah. So that makes you wonder, like, for what Fiala ended up going for, is it just that Minnesota really liked Brock Faber, or were the Ducks just not really interested in doing that? Well, Verbeek has said he's willing to make any type of move to make the team better, whether that's moving prospects and picks for younger players, for moving picks for other players, for moving up in the draft, moving down in the draft. Like, he's really willing to do whatever. Do you see the Ducks making a move outside of trading up in the draft or moving players out to get a DeBrincat, a Chychrun, or somebody lower level than that?
They got to do something to fill out their defense, and they got to do something to kind of add some forwards, and they got to do something to meet the floor. I think they probably do things that bring on huge contracts of players who are about to go out. Like, they've got a year or two now where they can take those bad contracts, get more draft picks, get more prospects, get that thing up and running. And they have that room, and they've got to spend money. Like, they can't avoid it at this point. Will they bring in some veteran guys to try and keep this team somewhat watchable? I think they do that in a sense, because you can't keep Zegras and the younger guys and everybody in just a culture of, listen, we're going to suck, so we're not even going to try, so don't you bother trying either, and we're not really going to put a team together. We're just going to, on paper, we have enough money to make this happen. So they got to put something that's watchable out there that, it probably come in the form of more veteran, but, they're not going to be swinging for the fences, trying to get, huge deals. If they have a young player that they can get and use some of their assets to move around, I'm sure they will. But, they're going to get people, but I just don't think it's going to be like this. We're getting the top two free agents. We're not doing that.
Yeah,
I think.
Yeah, I mean, I don't. It doesn't make sense to me. I don't.
The ask for some of these guys is insane, right? Like, DeBrincat is like a high first.
Yeah.
It'd be like the 10. Zellweger plus. Like, it's insane.
So my brain twitched off. trading for a chicken or a DeBrincat makes sense to me. Going out and getting a big name FA does not make sense to me.
Yeah.
I don't see the benefit of going out and getting a free agent, since none of the free agents are younger than 27 and none of the Ducks are going to be ready in the next year. You know what I mean? As far as turning it into a competing roster, I think going after a guy like Chikrin and bringing him in to help build what you have, I think makes a lot of sense. I think going out and getting a guy like DeBrincat, you know, what is going on in Winnipeg? Are they going to fall apart? Are they going to do this, right? Do you want to go out and maybe get a guy like Kyle Connor? But even then, he's a little bit older. I think there will be players available that are worth looking into. But I am with Jay. I would expect 2 or 3 deals worth total about 17 to 20 million being on the books for next year. I think James Van Riemsdyk is far more likely to be on this team than Alex DeBrincat. You know what I mean? I think I would have said the same thing about Shea Weber over Jacob Chikrin. You know, the thing that makes me pause is how quickly does Verbeek want to put his mark on this? Because as much as the deadline, you know, was a little bit different from what Anaheim fans are used to, I don't think he did anything major, right? He just sent out some UFAs, and he was just like, I'm not losing these guys for nothing. We're going to send them out the door, and we'll go from there. So, you know, I mean, there's already talk of Manson maybe being interested in coming back, or Anaheim being interested in Manson coming back. Mm-hmm. So, you know, it makes far more sense to me that they're going to go out, look to get a pick or a prospect from some of these teams, and take on a bad deal or two. I would love to see him go out and get Chikrin. I think he would be a perfect guy to bring in based on timeline, skill set, age, the contract he's on, all that kind of stuff. I think he would make a lot of sense.
Yep.
You know, DeBrincat would be great, but there's less time with that contract. He's RFA arbitration eligible at the end of this year. So
yeah, you signed him to like 9.5 next year pretty much. So
I mean, yeah, if you can get him at 8, that's huge.
Yeah.
You know, because especially if he is playing with a guy like Zegras or Terry, like there's a good chance that he could just become a 50 goal scorer. You know what I mean? Like he's got that kind of ability. So, you know, I think there are a lot of questions, but I would expect any trades Anaheim makes to more than likely be for futures.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. It's going to be a fun day. Again, who the Ducks could draft, whether they move up, whether they make trades, I think it's all up in the air. It's the first kind of offseason we've had, obviously, with a new GM in a long time. And the Ducks have a lot of flexibility with the amount of cap space they have, with the amount of draft picks they have, to really go out and approach it any way they want. So it's going to be a lot of fun to watch. One thing I would say is if they don't make any trades, it's not a failure. It's not a failure of a deadline. It just means whatever was out there just didn't make sense for the team. I don't think there should be any expectations that the Ducks need to move John Gibson, that they need to go out and acquire DeBrincat or Chikrin to have a successful offseason. If they go through this draft and they just draft at every position that they have right now, that's fine. I don't have any issues with that. I don't think they're in a position right now where they have to make moves, they have to move guys out, or they have to bring things in. I know there's a lot of people that I've seen that are in that mindset, which is fine, that are saying that, you know, the Ducks have to do something at the draft for it to be successful. I think there's a lot of time to still do that, to bring in bad contracts if you want to use that cap space to go make trades, or during free agency and after that for it to be fine. But there's a lot of room for things to happen at the draft. We're only 4 days away, so it's going to be a lot of fun. But we're over 2 hours, so we're pushing it here.
Sorry, everyone.
We knew this one was going to be long, though. These ones are always long. We had a lot of players to profile, a lot of stuff to talk about for the draft, so it's all right. Watch it in 2 parts. If you made it through this whole 2 hours and 10 minutes or whatever in one part, you got a lot of free time, and I appreciate you sticking around.
Just like us, apparently.
But yeah, thanks for coming on, guys. It was a lot of fun. Get back on here. Looking forward to the draft on. I don't know what I was gonna say Friday. I don't even know what day the 7th is. Just
Thursday.
on the 7th on Thursday.
Yeah, first round is Thursday.
Yeah, we might do something live for that draft. I don't know. It just depends on how the schedule works. I might jump on at least for round 1 to look at the first 2 picks that they get, potential trades. That's the plan, but we'll see how it pans out. Anything you guys want to sign off with before we head out, or?
No, goodbye, losers. Oh, go America. That's on Monday.
Yeah.
So there's that, Eddie.
Yeah, Canada Day was a couple days ago, so.
No one cares. No one cares. We're talking about America now. Just sit back, know your place.
Eddie was feeling
Loft
his oats
above a great
earlier
party.
about Canada Day. He was feeling himself. He was talking mad shit.
Was he?
Yeah. About
That's
that.
cute. That's cute. Canadians
So-
get all mad.
I know, it's adorable.
Don't ignore us, Eddie. We're talking to you. Huh?
Huh? Yeah. Huh?
What?
Yeah.
No, sorry, I had no
Yeah,
say in
sure,
this, I
sure.
thought. I had no say. I can't talk about
Hey.
Canada. I got no say. All right.
But yeah, I know. Yeah, we're pretty sure we got somebody lined up for after the draft to go over some of the prospects that Anaheim took. We're really looking forward to that. And then
Is it me?
it's Pat. Well, we were
Yes,
gonna have Pat
it's-
because he's our
it's-
Oh
prospect
yeah,
whisperer.
no, he's really good at that stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's huge into it.
Yeah.
I mean, look, he's been around the entire time we've been
No,
doing this kind of
yeah.
stuff.
He's had a great relationship with Bob Murray, so
yeah,
he's
I mean,
well
he's-
connected.
he's the new Bob McKenzie, and he knows everybody and talks to everybody.
That's why he hasn't been on. He's been
Yes.
he's been
He's
grinding.
just so busy, just talking to all
He's
the
big.
NHL.
He's big time now.
Rink-a-dink operation we got going.
Oh, shit.
All right. Well, thanks for sticking around, guys. We will be back after the draft with our preview show. We've got a few other things planned for the offseason as well. We got to look at free agency too, so we'll get into that after July 7th. I think free agency begins on the 13th, which is weird. We're used to it being on the 1st. But appreciate you guys coming out, and we will see you on draft day. Take care, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, guys.